Chapter 400. The Power to Manipulate Earth. 10,000 meters above sea level stretched the white sea, Sky Island. The Golden Melee had caught a powerful updraft, breaking clean through the cumulus barrier and racing along the sea of clouds far below. Nami stepped to the rail and peered over. There was no water in sight, only an endless field of fluffy white clouds, like an ocean suspended in the sky. How could a ship sail on clouds? She couldn't hide her surprise at the impossible sight. Luffy and the others, for their part, were a bit breathless. None of them had ever been this high above the blue sea, but thanks to their exceptional constitutions, they soon recovered their sea legs. The log pose's indicator whipped around to point forward. Nami studied its direction, then casually called out to Sanji and the helmsman, "Turn starboard. Head wherever that needle points." They obeyed, and after half a day's sailing through the clouds, a pale island loomed into view, its shores glowing like a scene from a dream. "Look over there, it's Sky Island," Sanji cried. All at once, the Straw Hats confronted the legendary island suspended in the sky. Ahead of them lay new mysteries, and a power rooted deep in the earth itself. Chapter 7. Arrival at Angel Island. The clouds below the Golden Mary swirled and stretched into a vast expanse of golden light. From their crow's nest vantage, Luffy and the crew stared in disbelief. "Sky Island! It's real!" Robin gasped. Excitement lit each face as the ship drifted slowly toward the island's edge. After months of chasing legends, they had finally arrived at this floating world. Meanwhile, on Angel Island's lookout tower, a small mechanical sentinel, its features like a child's toy, bolted to attention. Its porcelain eyes widened when it spotted the Golden Mary gliding over Angel Beach. "Report! Intruders approaching," it chattered, its metal limbs clicking as it clambered down the spiral stairs. Moments later, the island's captain burst into the grand hall just outside the central palace. "Captain," the toy cried after him, "outsiders are landing on Angel Beach." Without hesitation, the captain sprinted across polished marble floors to find the island's priest. In the throne room's antechamber, the priest's robes rippled like clouds as he strode in. "Intruders?" he murmured, eyes narrowing. At the far end of the chamber, perched on a floating white cloud seat, sat Sugarman, chief enforcer of Angel Island. He lounged like a spoiled child, a vine of grapes in one hand and a handful of candy in the other. With a mischievous tilt of his head, he popped a grape in his mouth and fixed the priest with a lazy stare. The priest bowed. "Master Sugarman, a ship flew in from below. Outsiders are on our shores." Sugarman eyed him between bites. "Outsiders? How quaint." He snorted, tossing a grape into the air and catching it. "Remember, this island has been under the Ghost Hand Pirates' rule for months. Since Nethan seized control of Sky Island, Angel Island has answered only to him. No one trespasses here uninvited." He leaned back on his cloud seat as though challenging the very sky. "Prepare the defenses. If those fools think they can just drift in, they'll learn why this island belongs to the Ghost Hand Pirates, and to Nethan, our master." Below them, Luffy and his friends continued their final approach, eager to discover the secrets of Sky Island and unaware of the perilous welcome that awaited them on Angel Beach. Sandu had first come to Angel Island on holiday and fallen hopelessly in love with its cloud-piercing cliffs and mist-shrouded waterfalls. She never went home. Nethan, the island's lord, didn't mind. He welcomed her as a permanent guest. One morning in the council hall, the senior priest bowed before Granos. "Lady Sandu is said to have come from Qinghai," he reported. "Had she hailed from Western Sky Peak, we would have been informed long ago. It appears she arrived on the ascending current instead." Granos sat at the head of the polished stone table, casually keeking grapes from a silver bowl. His rank was equal to Ganfer's, and he answered directly to Nethan. He oversaw the island's arcane devices. Ganfer supervised everyday affairs. The two lords rarely clashed. "When any unknown visitors set foot on Angel Island," Granos said, dropping a grape into his mouth, "you report straight to me, and see that they're detained." The priest froze. Granos reached for another grape. "Isn't the trouble in Apayardo bad enough?" he muttered. "Don't add more headaches to my ledger." The priest bowed deeply, cheeks flushed. "Yes, my lord, I will see to it immediately." And with that, he slipped out of the hall, resigned but obedient. Just after the priest left, the great iron wall giant, Granu's sworn guardian, turned to him in the hall. "I still say we should report this to headquarters," he rumbled. "With the barrier fruit's power, once you raise an all-around shield like that, nobody short of a top-tier armament hockey user, or someone who can neutralize barriers, will break through it in 10.5 months. At that point, just call for backup. Nethin will be here in no time. What's the problem?" Granu plucked 5 grapes from a small bowl and popped them into his mouth one by one. "They're nothing more than toys," he said with a casual grin. "Nobody will remember them." The Iron Wall giant frowned, finding himself momentarily at a loss. He'd sworn to protect Granu, yes, but he was also charged with reining in his master's wilder impulses. Clearing his throat, he admitted, "I know my duty is to keep you safe, and to make sure you don't go off half-cocked." Far above the sea lanes of the Grand Line, a vast expanse of sky stretched out, soaring over Cake Island and the fabled Skypiea. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the Straw Hat crew was rumored to have landed on Angel Island. Nethin, still seated at the breakfast table, shook his head as he absorbed Robin's report. Despite every effort to reroute them, Luffy and his crew were still on course for Sky Island. It wasn't hard to see why. The magnetic force emanating from Angel Island was so intense that any log pose passing nearby was irresistibly pulled skyward. Normally, once you skirted the island's perimeter, the log pose would realign and point to the next island, but Luffy never missed an excuse to chase an adventure in the clouds. Robin propped her chin in her hands, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Santang plans to capture the entire Straw Hat crew and turn them into trophies," she said, amusement dancing in her eyes. "I must admit, it's an intriguing idea." Nethin clicked his tongue, but he wasn't blaming Granos. It was typical of the man to conceal his vulnerabilities, stubbornly shouldering every risk himself. "All right," Nethin muttered. "I'll keep tabs on him." Robin tilted her head, her expression growing serious. "I've already taken steps to stop him," she revealed. "Besides, the Straw Hats have just defeated a warlord of the sea. The celestial dragons alone can't hope to bring them down, but if the Iron Wall giant chooses to intervene, Granos herself will be in grave danger. The gains outweigh the losses." Robin studied the map spread before her. "Once Sugar faints, every toy she's created will snap back into human form, and that spells serious trouble. Nearly all her victims are pirates who've trespassed into Nethin's territory or tried to challenge him. When they revert, they'll riot. It may not threaten the entire Grand Line, but it'll definitely cause chaos. Let's hope she tires herself out before it gets worse." Nethin nodded, brushing a crumb of cake from his lapel. "Agreed. Let's pray her rampage ends quickly." He paused, eyeing the charts. "And Luffy's group? Who knows if they'll suddenly burst into a pocket dimension or break out gear 2nd and 3rd all at once on Sky Island?" Robin gave a sharp nod, then her expression darkened. "That brings me to another matter. Angel Island." "Angel Island?" Nethin leaned forward, wiping a smear of icing from his finger. Robin frowned. "The holy land of Apayado, the upper ruins of Gaia Island washed ashore on the empty isle. Someone there has started calling himself a god. The priests mounted a crusade against him, and were utterly annihilated." "A man claiming divinity?" Nethin echoed, brow lifting. He tapped the table thoughtfully. "That's a threat we can't ignore." Nethin's brow furrowed in confusion. Could it really be Enel? He'd encountered Enel before, but had never given him much thought. Besides, the Goro Goro no Mi was still in Enel's hands. So who was this Enil who'd stormed the sacred grounds of Apayado and utterly annihilated the priest-led crusader force? It made no sense. He turned to Robin. "What else do we know?" Robin paused, sifting through the meager reports. "The entire crusade was wiped out, so only scraps of testimony survived," she said. "But every account mentions that this self-styled god can literally manipulate the earth." Nethin's mind raced. He recalled how, back on Angel Island, he'd once feigned earthbending, warping soil and rock with his distortion power to crush their opponents. But an actual devil fruit user who commanded the very ground? If this was the same Enel, no, it couldn't be. Enel's gift was lightning, not earth. And yet here was someone wielding a genuine earth fruit, stealing one god's power only to claim another's. He leaned forward. "Do we know the fruit's name? Stone fruit? Soil fruit?" Robin shook her head. "No exact designation. Witnesses only described his power as the very earth obeys him." Nethan let out a slow breath, tension knotting his shoulders. Whoever this new god was, his arrival changed everything. And if he truly could bend the earth to his will, their next move just became infinitely more dangerous. Nethan and Robin hunched over the flickering monitor, comparing the few scraps of data they'd managed to gather. First, we have Pika's power. Robin began, tapping the screen. Under Doflamingo's command, he can assimilate and manipulate existing rock, pretty much turn himself into living stone. Then there's the evolved Logia known as the stone fruit, which is considered upper tier. But even that only lets you fuse with nearby earth and soil. It can't actually produce new rock or soil out of nothing. And once you're out at sea, it loses all effect. She scrolled down. By contrast, the soil fruit, what some call the tutu fruit, is a natural system Logia that actively generates rock and earth at will. That's a huge leap in power and versatility. Unfortunately, though, we've got too little reliable information to be certain which one we're dealing with. Nethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment as he weighed their options. Then he stood, resolve hardening his features. All right, I'll go see for myself, and if this really is the tutu fruit, I'll craft a new puppet incarnation, one that'll outclass anything they've seen before. Chapter 401, Luffy's Decision, Angel Island. When Luffy and his crew landed, no one stirred to oppose them. Under Nethan's firm rule, the inhabitants of this sky island regarded the arrival of a few Qinghai pirates as routine, and only those of at least captain rank in the Ghost Hand Pirates are ever granted permission to set foot here. Such visitors automatically receive the highest courtesy. Unbelievable! There are working automatons! Luffy cried. Eyes wide as clockwork, figures hauled beams and scaffolding, busily remodeling a soaring temple. Zoro rubbed his chin, frowning. By all logic, toys shouldn't be able to work. Logic? Nami smirked. On Sky Island? Everything here breaks the rules. Sanji leaned closer, a thoughtful gleam in his eye. You're right, maybe this really is the fabled paradise. His gaze drifted to a passing woman whose beauty stopped him mid-sentence. And look at her. Sanji, Nami's swift smack to his arm, snapped him back. As the Straw Hats exchanged amazed glances, the true wonder of Angel Island settled over them. Here, in a place where reason bowed to marvel, Luffy's decision, to press onward in search of the One Piece, felt more certain than ever. Nethan flipped the small recording conch over in his hand and frowned. You know, these shells aren't just toys, they're specialized tools. They can do a lot more than just play back a voice. One of the white beret soldiers escorting Luffy's crew shot him an incredulous look. No, conches and toys are completely different things. Huh? Luffy glanced back. Toys? What do you mean? The soldier spoke gravely. Those so-called toys used to be people, criminals no less, until Mr. Sugar used her power to shrink and transform them into dolls. There was a stunned silence. Sanji's brow creased. They were humans before, then why turn them into toys? That's barbaric. It's the law of Sky Island, the soldier replied without a hint of apology. Anyone guilty of a third-degree crime or higher loses their human form and is forced to serve as a toy to atone for their sins. Sanji's face went pale as he stared at a distant line of motionless figures. You mean they were dangerous criminals and now they're just playthings? That's monstrous. A squad member nodded as he answered. Once someone is turned into a toy, they can't harm humans. They must obey every order from the beret troops and their superiors. I see, Sauron and the others murmured, inclining their heads. Sky Island's punishment system was truly unique. Turning offenders into obedient laborers, living tools essentially, was far more merciful than locking them away in cages. Yet having the berets spell it out erased much of their earlier astonishment. Nethan, who'd been walking alongside them, paused and glanced back. Speaking of which, I noticed a lot of those toys as we came in. Is crime really that common up here on Sky Island? The white beret troopers exchanged a look. Not at all, one of them replied. Only a small number of the toys are criminals from Sky Island itself. The majority are hardened pirates captured out on the Blue Sea. Nethan's eyes widened. Pirates from the Blue Sea? He almost spat out his next words in disbelief. Pirates on the Qinghai Sea? Nethan blurted out, eyes wide with innocent surprise. Silence fell over the white beret unit. Their expressions froze in disbelief. Then, without warning, Sanji, Usopp, and the others burst forward, fists flying. In an instant, Luffy was knocked off his feet and pummeled into the dust. "He said we're adventurers on the Qinghai Sea," Nami taunted as she kicked Luffy hard. "Not pirates." The white beret soldiers exchanged puzzled glances. Sweat beaded on Sanji's forehead, but he forced a laugh and changed tack. "So, is there anything worth seeing around here? You must be unfamiliar with this region. Let us show you around." At last, Zoro and the rest pulled back. Luffy lay sprawled on the ground, his nose swollen and bruised, one hand trembling as he propped himself up. He glared at them all, lips curly, gnawing in defiance. "Those toys," he rasped, voice low with warning. Nami's fist connected with Luffy just as he was halfway to his feet, sending him sprawling back to the ground. Once the dust settled, the White Beret unit offered to show Luffy and the others around Angel Island. Scenery, local specialties, the works. After a long, leisurely walk, they reached the island's far shore, the side opposite where the Straw Hat's boat had landed. Across the water, a strange shape rose from the horizon, the holy land of Apayado. "Wait! Land!" Sanji blurted, eyes wide. The rest shared his shock. None of them had expected any solid ground on what was supposed to be a deserted isle. The White Berets glanced at the distant plateau of Apayado, their faces tinged with awkwardness. Sanji noticed and spun around. "Everything okay?" One of the berets cleared his throat. "Actually, there's a reason we look so uneasy. You see all that soil around Qinghai? It's incredibly precious to us. And Apayado." He let the word hang in the air. "It's our sacred sanctuary, gifted to our people by the gods 400 years ago. We've sworn to protect it ever since." "Come to think of it," one of Sauron's soldiers admitted, cheeks flushing, "just a few days ago someone stormed into the Holy Land, took control, and actually proclaimed himself a god, insisting that the sanctuary belongs to him." "Is that for real?" Sauron asked, spinning to face the rest of the group. The man from the beret unit ground his fist. "Yesterday the High Priest led our crusading force to reclaim it, but the entire army was wiped out." He exhaled with a bitter sorrow, shoulders slumping, yet his jaw remained set. "But mark my words, sooner or later we'll take the Holy Land back." A tense silence followed. After a moment, Luffy, who'd been staring at his boots, lifted his head, punched his palm at chest height, and declared with a grin, "Come on, Uncle. You've been feeding us and letting us join your missions this whole time. Now let us help you win back the Holy Land." Chapter 402. I am God! I am God! Don't meddle in other people's affairs. With a roar, Nami swung her staff as though possessed, aiming a fierce blow at Luffy's head. Yet Luffy didn't even flinch. Zoro let out a low growl and dropped his hand to the hilt of his sword. Sanji flicked his Zippo open, sparked a cigarette, and exhaled a lazy plume of smoke before growling. "This place matters too much to you and the ladies. We've got it covered." A surge of confidence rippled through the group. Ever since leaving Logue Town, the Straw Hats had squared off against formidable foes from every corner of the Grand Line. They'd toppled King Wapol, navigated deadly waters, and earned every ounce of faith in their own strength. Across the way, a beret-clad soldier nodded grimly. "These enemies are so dangerous that even the Marines can't handle them. We've already sent word to Wano." He never got to finish. Before his stunned eyes, Luffy and the others exploded into motion, racing down to the shoreline, vaulting aboard 2 waiting Coast Guard cutters, and roaring away toward Apayado. The beret trooper froze, jaw slack, utterly shocked by their bold escape. Nethin came to his senses only when it was already too late. His commanders had broken every rule by ordering him to pursue the intruders armed with nothing but a single weba, and panic threatened to overwhelm him. "This is bad," he thought, forcing himself to run toward the center of Apayado Island. If ever there were a moment to alert the captain and the high priests, it was now. At the island's heart stood the Temple of Apayado, a soaring marble structure devoted to the soil deity. Under normal circumstances, only the highest priests in the Ganfort were permitted in its inner sanctum to conduct the sacred rites. Today, however, the entire courtyard was occupied by a band of outsiders. Nethin burst through the temple gates and skidded to a halt. In the middle of the courtyard, Anilo stood with a triumphant grin, cocking his head as his ears twitched in amusement. "So they've even taken Apayado," he said, surveying the scene. A Sky Islander attendant bowed deferentially behind him. Anilo snorted in disdain, then stamped his foot. The earth trembled beneath that single, powerful impact. Dust and stones leapt upward, only to settle again in a shaking circle around him. He scooped up a fistful of the trembling soil and raised it before the assembled priests. "The earth bows only to the gods," Anilo declared, voice ringing across the courtyard. "I claim this ground in my own name. From this day forward, let the world remember who the true deity is." Nathan's heart pounded in his chest. He'd warned no one in time, and now the battle for Apayato's soul was about to begin. Chapter 7. One of Nathan's attendants watched in awe as their master kneaded the clay beneath his feet, shaping it with effortless precision. In all of Qinghai, the power to summon earth, rich as gold and precious as diamonds, was unrivaled. No wonder everyone followed Nathan. "Master," the attendant finally whispered, bowing low. "What shall we do next?" Nathan straightened, brushing loose dirt from his sleeve. He glanced toward the distant archipelago known as Angel Island. "First, we'll deal with Angel Island. Rumor says its inhabitants claim the gods still walk the world, but they show them no reverence. That's a crime I can't ignore." He raised a hand, ready to summon his forces, when a breathless guard tore into the courtyard. "Master Nathan, excuse the intrusion, but there's trouble." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Speak." The guard knelt hastily, voice trembling. "A band of Qinghai warriors has broken onto Angel Island." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Qinghai? Weren't they already captured?" The guard swallowed, sweat beading on his forehead. "They escaped, or perhaps they were never caught. In any case, they're far stronger than expected. Our men can't hold them back." Nathan exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face. "Incompetence," he muttered. Then louder, "Very well, if Hey, dare set foot on this sacred soil without the gods' leave, I will see to their punishment myself." Deep within the ancient forest, the air crackled with residual magic. Tree trunks lay splintered, and the undergrowth was torn to shreds by arcane blasts. Clearly, a fierce clash had just ended here, its echoes still pulsating through the charred earth and splintered stones. Somewhere in the shadows, the intruders from Qinghai regrouped, unaware that Nathan himself would soon cross the boundary of this so-called holy land, and that they would answer directly to him. Nathan stepped into the great hall, its marble pillars carved with the faces of ancient gods, and stopped short. A lone Sky Islander lay sprawled on the floor, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. He struggled up to one knee, glaring at Nathan and his crew. You dare to trespass in this sacred place? Master Anilo will never forgive you." Nathan's jaw set. He took a steady breath and replied evenly, "We're not interested in you. We came for Anilo, and will leave only after we've faced him." He clenched his fists, the brim of his hat casting a sharp shadow over his eyes. Sanji flicked ash from his cigarette and frowned coldly. "You've been making life miserable for those Sky Island ladies for far too long." Zoro leaned forward, one hand resting on his sword hilt. "I've heard rumors of Inilo's blade skills. I wouldn't mind testing my sword against his." The Sky Islander stared at them in stunned silence. "What? Are you all insane?" Before he could say more, his head lolled sideways and he slumped unconscious. From the back of the group, Nami strode forward, rubbing her temples. "You three are impossible. What if Inilo really is as powerful as they say?" She cast a worried glance around the hushed chamber. Nathan watched, half amused, as Sanji flicked away the spent cigarette and offered Nami a teasing grin. "Relax, Miss Nami. We took down Chiwukai before. I'll protect you if you get scared." Nami's eyes flashed. In a heartbeat, she struck him with a perfectly aimed punch, sending him crashing against a tree trunk. "You're more dangerous than any real threat," she snapped. As the group gathered their gear to move on, Zoro's expression suddenly darkened. "Did you guys feel that?" he asked, scanning the ground. Nami glanced at him, puzzled. Sanji, rubbing his jaw, crouched to examine the earth. "Something's wrong. The ground, it's shifting." Before they could react, a low rumble swelled beneath their boots. The forest floor bucked and undulated as if alive. Loose stones skittered away. The nearby trees trembled. "Grab a trunk, now," Sanji bellowed. Nathan, Usopp, Nami, Zoro, and the others lunged for the nearest trees and wrapped their arms around the rough bark. The tremors hit in violent pulses. Boom, 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 each one threatening to rip them from their tenuous grip. Then, with a deafening roar, the field exploded. Geysers of earth and rock shot skyward like fountains, showering them in a storm of dirt and debris. I, Nethan, watched as the earth split open, cracks racing outward inch by inch. Trees at the edge of the clearing toppled one after another, and the soil heaved upward until it formed a massive, jagged plateau stretching to the horizon. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the tremors subsided. Sauron and the others lifted their heads, eyes fixed on the towering stone above us. In the distance, a lone figure appeared, walking deliberately toward the summit. With every step he took, the rocky platform seemed to rise to meet him, guiding his path until he stood at its highest point. He surveyed us with an air of contempt. "Are you the ones defiling my sacred ground?" His voice was calm but carried a weight that made even the wind still. Sanji's expression hardened. He stepped forward, fists clenched, and glared up at the newcomer. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The stranger's lips curved into a cruel smile. He looked down at us, at Sanji, at Luffy, at everyone assembled, and spoke slowly, with absolute certainty. "I am God." Chapter 4, Power of the Earth. A tense silence fell over the shattered sanctuary as Enelu strode forward, his robes fluttering in the charged air. Sanji tilted his head, a cold smile on his lips. "A god," he scoffed. "And does a god really go around stealing other people's holy sites?" Enelu's eyes narrowed until they were slits, a dangerous spark igniting in their depths. "Don't be so quick to dismiss me," he hissed. "Only I command the power of the earth and the magic of the Sky Islands. Every floating isle owes its allegiance to me, even that so-called ghost hand." He let the name hang for a moment, watching his audience shift uneasily. "He was once a member of Bika," Enelu continued, "until Nethan conquered the land and claimed every Sky Island as his own. The ghost hand languished in captivity until recently, when he unlocked divine power, true dominion over the earth itself." Sanji's smile faded as Enelu's voice rose with fervor. "He isn't here merely to seize this sacred place," the would-be god proclaimed. "He means to wrest control of every uninhabited isle away from Nethan." Sauron frowned and repeated, "The Ghost Hand? I thought I'd heard that name. Did he Dowie ever mention him?" Enelu sneered. "You really don't know? All the empty islands now answer to that Qinghai native, yet he is nothing more than a mortal. By right, they belong to the gods." Before anyone could respond, the earth itself roared. A furious crack gouged through the plaza, sending shards of stone flying. Boom! The ground heaved and split, heralding a confrontation that would shake both heaven and earth. Nethan's fist struck a jagged rock at his feet, shattering it into fragments. He glared up at Enelo and snarled, "Save your ghost hands. I'm going to blow you to pieces." Before Enelo could react, Nethan leapt forward and unleashed a brutal punch. The impact rang out like thunder against Enelo's chest, tearing a perfect hole, yet no blood flowed. Instead, dark soil tumbled from the cavity. In moments, the earth within him writhed and reshaped itself, sealing the wound as if it had never existed. Sanji and Usopp stared in disbelief. "How is that even possible?" Usopp whispered, his voice trembling. At the same time, Zoro's eyes narrowed. He drew his twin blades, each steel edge glinting in the dim light. With a feral grin, he shouted, "Dual sword style, rising cross." In a blur, he hacked upward, cleaving through the swelling earthen platform beneath Enelo. His blades passed clean through the figure, splitting him into 3 grotesque segments. But when the dust cleared, Enelo stood whole and utterly calm. The jagged fissures in his earthen flesh resembled cracked mud, and then, just as swiftly, they closed, merging seamlessly. With a nonchalant yawn, he brushed imaginary dust from his shoulder, as if awaking from a nap rather than surviving 2 brutal assaults. Silence fell over the group. Nethan clenched his fists, jaw tight with frustration. This was no ordinary foe, and they had only just begun to understand how impossible defeating him would be. Boom! Nethan rocketed into the air, his foot smashing into Enelo's head and shattering it like hardened clay. Dust and chunks of earth sprayed everywhere, but no blood. Enelo's entire body was made of living mud. "Monster!" Chopper cried, terror etched across his face. Nethan landed, eyes locked on the muddy figure before him. He ground his teeth. "So he's a devil fruit user. A Logia type." Enelo tilted his head, mud dripping from his chin. "Impressive," he murmured. "Not just some ignorant novice, but a mere Logia, controlling Earth itself, is on a whole different level." He cast a dismissive glance at Luffy. In the next instant, Enilo's expression went cold. He swept his hand through the air, and the power of his earth fruit surged forth. "God's punishment," he boomed. The ground trembled violently as countless clods of soil burst skyward. They swirled together into a colossal meteor, nearly 100 meters wide, and then it came crashing down toward Uffy and the rest of the crew. "No way!" Nami's hand flew to her mouth as she stared skyward in horror. Luffy and the others turned equally grim. They'd been confident of victory at Eni's lobby, sure their combined strength would see them through, but Enel's sudden maneuver sent a colossal meteor hurtling down on them, an utterly overwhelming display of power. "Gomu Gomu, no! Jet pistol!" Luffy fired a rubber-boosted punch. "Onigiri!" Zoro launched a three-sword strike. "Star rifle!" Sanji hammered the rock with his ironclad kick. Blasts of wind and shockwaves tore around the tumbling stone behemoth as the Straw Hats poured every ounce of their might into it. For a heartbeat, it held firm. Then, with a deafening crack, the meteor shattered into jagged fragments, spraying debris across the battlefield. Enel watched the spectacle with detached amusement. "Not bad," he said, voice cold. "A decent appetizer, just a taste of what awaits that blue-haired fellow from Eni's lobby." Nethin lunged at Anilu with a roar, swinging a powerful punch at his opponent's midsection. This time, however, Anilu was ready. He sidestepped smoothly, letting Nethin's fist slice past empty air, then whipped out his hand and caught Nethin's arm with a vicious backhand grip. Unprepared for the counter, Nethin was yanked off balance, and before he could recover, Anilu's rock-like fist slammed into him with bone-shaking force, sending him flying backward. Zoro and Sanji leapt to assist without hesitation, but Anilu slammed his palm into the ground. Cracks spidered out beneath their feet, then exploded in a spray of jagged stone. The two chefs braced themselves, but the blast still hurled them backward amid a rain of rubble. Nami let out a sharp gasp, pressing a hand to her mouth. She'd heard rumors of Anilu's exploits, raiding forbidden shrines, stealing sacred relics, but she'd never imagined he wielded such devastating strength. Nethin, however, refused to stay down. He hoisted himself to his feet, stretched out his rubber limbs, and let out another defiant cry. Thanks to his stretchy body, the previous blow hadn't even bruised him. With renewed determination, he charged forward once more. Anilu merely snorted and swept his backhand through the air. The ground trembled under the impact of their renewed clash, and the battle raged on. With a single flick of his hand, the earth on Anilu's side erupted like a towering wave and crashed down on Luffy. "Damn it!" Sanji and Zoro spat curses under their breath and lunged forward to help, but Enilu merely turned, swept his hand in a lazy arc, and unleashed another surge of soil. Before they could react, the three of them were engulfed in a torrent of rock and dirt, swept from their feet as though caught in a raging river. They fought and kicked against the crushing weight, but there was no purchase, no hope of escape. Then Enilu raised his other hand, palm open, and called forth a sphere of empty air. The avalanche of earth froze midstream, solidifying into a massive dirt mound with only Luffy's, Zoro's, and Sanji's heads jutting out like grotesque markers. Enilu stepped past them without a second glance, his voice as cold and final as stone. "You cannot move. You cannot escape. You will remain trapped here until the end of your days. This is the fate reserved for those who dare offend a god." Chapter 404, One Punch. "Cut the crap, you bastard!" Luffy roared, even as half his body lay buried in that earthen mound. The exposed side of his head bristled with defiance. He thrashed wildly, inhaling in great, desperate gasps until fine cracks spidered across the hardened soil. After all, this was just compacted dirt, not solid rock. Enilu's eyes narrowed in surprise. He hadn't expected Luffy to keep fighting. Just as he raised his hand to seal the mound under another layer of earth, a sudden blast tore it apart from within. "Ha!" Luffy burst free, and next to him, Sauron yanked an arm loose from the debris. He slammed his sword hilt against the ground, smashing through the remaining dirt and landing on solid earth. "Thanks, Luffy." As Luffy and Zoro scrambled clear, Sanji delivered a powerful kick to the mound, sending chunks of earth flying off. In moments, Nami, Chopper, and the others tumbled free, dusting themselves off. Enilu watched them with a sneer. From a distance, he clenched his fist, drawing the surrounding earth into his power. With a cruel smile, he thrust his hand forward, and the ground beneath the Straw Hats erupted in a thunderous crash. Countless clumps of mud swirled together, merging into a colossal fist several meters across that slammed down toward Luffy and the others. In an instant, Luffy's body inflated like a balloon. "Zoro, Sanji," he bellowed, channeling the compressed air within him into his right arm until it ballooned to unbelievable size, rivaling even the rocky limb Enilo had formed. With a thunderous roar, Luffy hurled a counterpunch. The two gargantuan fists collided in a deafening boom. For a heartbeat, neither man yielded, but then the seams along Enilo's earthen arm began to crack. Splintering from fingers to shoulder, the mud and rock construct shattered and collapsed. Luffy's unstoppable blow drove straight into Enilo's chest, pulverizing him into chunks of soil and rock and sending him skidding backward. "Nice one, Luffy," Usopp cheered, while Chopper danced in excitement. Nami allowed herself a relieved smile. She hadn't expected such raw power. Luffy had broken Enilo's trick attack dead on and knocked him flying. But their celebration was cut short when, not far off, the mud began to swirl again, coalescing once more into the shape of Enilo's battered form. Enel's expression darkened. Luffy's last strike had shattered his attack and driven him off balance, an affront he could not tolerate. "You Skypians have finally enraged me," he snarled, fixing Luffy and the crew with a cold, contemptuous stare. At his command, the island trembled. Rifts cracked open, and walls of earth tore free from the ground, hurtling toward Enel as if drawn by his will alone. From within the churning dirt came his voice, deep and resonant. "Earth's power is not for you to command, not you Skypians, nor your ghost soldiers. Only a god may ever master it." Nami and the others watched in horror as the swirling mass of soil grew ever larger. It coalesced into a colossal golem of rock and clay, a titan so immense its head pierced the low-hanging clouds and its limbs spanned the island from horizon to horizon. High above them all, Enel's triumphant voice rang out once more. "Behold my divine avatar." The earth giant bowed its gargantuan head before the Straw Hats, its sheer scale dwarfing even the mightiest giants like Oz. "Take pride," Enel declared, his voice echoing across the quaking ground, "for few mortals witness the true form of a god." Far beyond the sacred lands of Apayado, all the way to Angel Island, people stopped in their tracks and stared in horror. High above the ground, an immense iron giant, a living colossus, towered between earth and sky. A stunned hush fell over the crowd. What is that?" the high priest whispered, voice trembling. Inside the palace, Granu was drawn outside by the commotion. Her heart pounded as she caught sight of the distant behemoth. She paled, her pupils contracting to pinpoints. Impossible. It must be the power of the one who just claimed Apayado. Beside her, the Iron Wall Guardian stepped forward, his face grave. In a low, resonant voice, he said, "This is serious. I didn't expect him to grow this strong." He clenched his massive fists. "My barrier can hold, but I can't stop him. With a single blow, he could obliterate this entire island." Fear flickered across Granu's eyes. If Angel Island were destroyed, she would bear part of the blame, and that kind of responsibility would haunt her for life. She drew herself up, voice urgent. "We must warn Wan Guo at once." A messenger bowed deeply. "He's been notified and is on his way." Granu exhaled, though her heart still thundered with dread. As the sky darkened with the giant's looming silhouette, she braced herself for whatever was coming next. The massive iron-walled giant scowled up at the earth giant looming overhead and spat. "By the time headquarters sends reinforcements, it'll be too late." Panic rippled through Angel Island. In the Apayado sanctuary, Nethan, Luffy, and the others lifted their heads to stare at the titanic newcomer. Their hearts sank. The giant was so vast it nearly dwarfed the island itself, an opponent in a completely different league. Even their strongest blows would barely crack a fingertip. A flat, emotionless voice cut through the chaos. "It's over." The Iron Giant raised a foot the size of a warship. Time seemed to slow as that enormous soul hovered above the Straw Hats. Then came thundering down. Luffy's eyes went wide. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Before anyone could even draw a breath, Sanji shouted at the top of his lungs, "Retreat! Run!" Sanji's cry snapped Nami, Chopper, Usopp, Robin, Frankie out of their shock. Together, they turned and sprinted for their lives. Nethan barely rolled clear of the Earth Giant's crushing first stomp. He hit the ground hard, slamming into Luffy, Sauron, and the others, but he escaped being flattened. Still, the shockwave from that colossal footfall blasted through them all like a tidal wave. With a series of thunderous booms, they were hurled dozens of meters across the cracked, shaking earth before skidding to a halt. Coughing up grit, they forced themselves upright. The sight that met their eyes froze them in their tracks. The giant loomed over them, easily twice the height of an elephant, its stony hide rippling with raw power. A cold sweat broke out on Nethin's back. Even Luffy, who'd faced down more than his fair share of monsters, looked momentarily at a loss. How could they fight something like this? They thought the battle against the Shichibukai in Logetown was their toughest challenge. They'd assumed that once they left that place, there'd be no more nightmares, no traps that forced them to run for their lives. But here, on this empty island, fate had dealt them an even greater terror. The ground shuddered anew. With a low, rumbling roar, the giant raised its other massive foot. A plume of dust and debris exploded outward as it prepared to strike again. Nethin steadied himself, scanning the clearing for anything, anywhere, to hide or to launch a counterattack. But against a foe of this size, every plan felt powerless. All he could do was grit his teeth and brace for the next impact. Luffy and the others froze as the giant's foot rose for another strike. Mere moments ago, it had nearly crushed them, but this time, Enilo's attention shifted. The massive foot halted in midair as the earth giant looked off into the distance. "Move," Luffy barked, and they all tumbled clear of the stomping zone. Gasping for breath, they dared to look up, just in time to see a lone figure hovering high above. A ripple of recognition passed through the crew. Nami's eyes widened. Even at this distance, she couldn't mistake the stance, the aura. "Phantom Hand Nethin," she whispered, voice trembling. 3 billion berry bounty, the world's strongest man. Only Nethin could have intervened with such ghostly speed and power. In that instant, Nami realized he was the one who'd stopped the giant's blow, and that meant only one thing. This deserted island's true ruler was none other than Nethin, the great pirate reigning at the very top of the world. Nami watched in awe as the earth giant towered above them, its sheer bulk blotting out the sky. It was so colossal that hope felt futile. If anyone could challenge such a behemoth, it was Nethin, the strongest man alive, yet even he seemed dwarfed by its enormity. A flicker of fear passed through Nami's normally steady gaze. From deep within the giant's stony body came a low, booming voice, "People of Skypiea." It was Enel's dull, arrogant tone, magnified by whatever power he'd fused with the earth itself. The sound rolled across the clouds, carrying all the way to Angel Island. Cutting through the air with lethal grace, Nethin hovered before the mammoth figure. In one swift motion, he seized Enel's body, his stern eyes narrowing. "So it really is you," he said, recognizing the unmistakable aura of the soil fruit, a rare high-tier stone fruit that let its wielder become one with the ground. The earth giant's face, eerily human yet carved of rock, twisted into a cruel grin. "I am the true God," Enel thundered. Nethin's lips curved into a dismissive half-smile. "God, huh? Spare me. If you think you're divine, prove it. Are you ready to fight?" Enel fell silent for a heartbeat, and then his cold, indifferent voice rolled across the sky. "As you wish, I will grant you a taste of heaven's judgment." No sooner had the words faded than the colossal earth giant at his side reared back and swung its massive arm. Nethin, hovering in midair, was barely more than a speck against the golem's towering form. In an instant, that fist shattered the very clouds around him, crashing down like a mountainside in collapse, wrapped in irresistible force. The impact's thunderous roar split the heavens and sent shockwaves surging through the air. Luffy, Zoro, and the rest of the Straw Hat crew stared upward, their faces drained of color. They were completely powerless to stop it. All they could do was watch, helpless, from below. Far off, on Angel Island's floating shores, countless Sky Islanders paused in alarm, binoculars raised to the sky. Though they couldn't make out Nethin's figure from such a distance, they recognized Enel's voice and understood immediately that the challenger had been struck. A hush fell over the island as they braced themselves, waiting to see whether Nethin could withstand the wrath of the heaven-sent giant. Nethin has ruled Sky Island for so long that his authority is absolute. He not only commands unmatched military might, but also wields Lafitte's mind hypnosis technique, bending wills and distorting thoughts to maintain order. Under his rule, Sky Island has prospered, yet Nethin's true power lies in the awe and fear he inspires, a godlike presence no one dares challenge. Now, however, a new threat emerges. Anilu's earth giant form towers over the battlefield, each thunderous step shaking the clouds. His colossal stone arm, summoned from the very bedrock of Angel Island, swings with cataclysmic force. Though the sheer magnitude of this assault chills every heart, not one soul contemplates surrender. All eyes fix on the duel above. At the edge of Angel Island, Gamfer stands tense and pale. If Nethin should fall here, there would be no defense against Anilu's power, and no telling what devastation would follow. The crowd holds its breath as the giant's fist hurtles towards Sky Island's ruler. High in the air, Nethin remains calm. With a measured inhale, he lifts his right hand and closes his fingers into a solid fist. In a heartbeat, that iron-hard knuckle meets the earth giant's blow head-on, sending a shockwave rolling across the heavens. Nethin's entire body was no more than a mosquito beside the earth giant's fist, and his own punch barely the size of a needle's tip. Yet in the very next instant, their blows met. Time seemed to stop. If any sound emerged, it was only a dull, thunderous thud, as though even noise itself had been shattered. Every witness stood frozen. Luffy and the Straw Hat crew, Ganfer and his sentries on Angel Island, even the iron giant sentinel guarding Sugar, all of them watched in stunned silence. Before their eyes towered the earth giant, a living island between sea and sky. Where Nethin's fist had struck, the giant's entire right arm, shoulder, half his massive chest, even part of his skull, had been cleaved away. A gaping wound yawned in his side, and overhead the cloud layer split open like a cracked dome, revealing pure blue sky that stretched unbroken to the horizon. Chapter 405, Defeating Enil. A deathly silence fell between heaven and earth. Only the massive earth giant remained standing, its right arm gone, half its chest gouged out, and most of its head shattered, yet it did not collapse. Impossible. This can't be. Enil's trembling voice rumbled from deep within the ruined body. Since consuming the soil fruit, he had believed himself unrivaled, especially upon the plains of Apayado, where he was said to be able to tear an island in two with a single blow. And yet, even this godlike power had proven no match for Nethin. God's judgment, Enil roared, filled with fury and disbelief. With the last of its strength, the giant swung its remaining arm in a savage arc, aiming to crush Nethin in midair. Nethin met the assault head-on. He tightened his stance, drew in a breath, and drove his fist into the colossal limb. Boom! The impact cracked the very air, a shockwave of raw distortion that splintered through the giant's arm and rippled across its wounded torso. Fissures raced over stone and flesh alike, fragmenting the creature's form with a series of sharp, echoing clicks. And then, at last, the earth giant collapsed. Dust and debris rained down as its shattered body crumbled into the soil of Apayado, defeated at last by Nethin's unyielding resolve. The earth giant's body split along countless fissures as chunks of rock and soil broke away. With a thunderous roar, the colossal form collapsed into 1,000 fragments, sending plumes of dust roaring into the sky. From a safe distance, Luffy and the others stood frozen in shock, minds still reeling as they watched the dust settle. Atop Angel Island's palace, Granu let out a long, relieved exhale. No longer would he fear Nethin's wrath. Beside him, the Iron Wall giant stared in wide-eyed awe. Lord Nethin's power, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. I'm but a shadow compared to him. He truly is the strongest in the world. Granu murmured to himself, recalling their first encounter on Dressrosa. Back then, Nethin had been far below the four emperors, at best the equal of a Shichibukai. Now, after countless battles and trials, he had climbed to the very apex of strength. Even his personal aide had seen her fortune soar. Here on Angel Island, she could indulge in any sweet she desired and enjoy herself in whatever way she pleased. A thunderous crack split the air as a massive clod of earth hurtled into the clearing before Luffy and the others. The soil quivered and writhed, slowly taking on the form of Enilo, as if he were trying to pull himself upright. But before the shape could fully solidify, Nethin, having fallen from the sky, stomped down on Enilo's head, Nahak pinning him hard against the ground. Enilo thrashed in vain. Nethin's boot came down again with a brutal slam, each impact rattling the earth beneath them until Enilo lay motionless, unconscious. Dusting his boot on the dirt, Nethin glanced over at the Straw Hat crew. One brow arched in mild surprise. Well, fancy meeting you here," he drawled. Nami felt his gaze settle on her and managed an awkward wave, her cheeks burning. She hesitated, searching for words and a name to call him by now that he wasn't Ross. Nethin cocked his head, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "So what are you all doing here?" Nami cleared her throat, scrambling for an answer. Well, it's a bit of a long story." Nami cleared her throat twice, trying to explain that they'd come to stop Enel, but with Enel having just torn them apart before Nethin dispatched him so effortlessly, she found herself at a loss for words. Usopp swallowed hard, visibly intimidated by Nethin's cold stare. "We heard someone was attacking the Holy Land, so we came to lend a hand," he blurted out. Nethin cocked an eyebrow. He didn't buy it for a second. He suspected Luffy had gone mad and stormed the Holy Land on a whim, or that Sauron had wandered off and dragged everyone else along. He turned to Nami. "Is that true?" Nami's mouth opened and closed, but no lie would come. Nethin's right hand rested on his sword hilt, a flicker of his devil fruit soul power at work, preventing any falsehood. Nethin stroked his chin thoughtfully. "So you broke into the Holy Land to handle Enel. I can respect that. That isn't a crime under Sky Island law." With that, Nethin lifted his hand and delivered a sharp strike to Luffy and the others, sending them sprawling to the ground. A sudden, invisible force seized Luffy and the others before they even had a chance to react. In an instant, they were lifted off the deck, hurtling skyward at breakneck speed. Usopp and Chopper screamed in terror as the wind tore past them, and then just as suddenly, they were flung toward Angel Beach on Angel Island. Moments later, the Straw Hats and Nethin crashed onto the cloud-like shore. Angel Beach's soft, buoyant surface swallowed their weight, letting them sink in as though into a giant down pillow. Comical mounds rose where each pirate landed, top-spilling over until they burst out, dazed and covered in fluffy white mist. Enel hovered above them, his feet firmly planted on the cloud's surface. With a mere gesture, he brushed Luffy and the others aside like rag dolls. Only then did Nethin wriggle free of the cloud cushion and look up at Enel's boot planted squarely on his back. A slow smile tugged at Nethin's lips. "I never saw this coming," he muttered. "An earth fruit." He remembered Pika's stone fruit, powerful on land, but almost useless at sea. In contrast, this natural system earth fruit operated on a whole other level. It might not have the blinding offense of lightning, ice, or magma, but its defensive versatility was unmatched. Enel's little trick just now was proof enough. The ground itself could be molded into a trap. Nethin shifted slightly under Enel's boot, mind racing with possibilities. An earth devil fruit might just turn the tides of any battle if one could master its true potential. Any regular fighter would be utterly outmatched by an earth giant of that size, especially one that can heal itself. Enilo, tiny and concealed deep within the Titan's body, is virtually untouchable. Only someone with Nethin's overwhelming strength, someone who could obliterate that golem with a single punch, might hope to bring him down that quickly. Even a seasoned general like Shinji Chiquan could battle Enilo, but he certainly couldn't end the fight in 2 or 3 blows. Nethin chuckled and shook his head. If he'd claimed that devil fruit himself, he could have unleashed his hurricane incarnation technique and rivaled an admiral's power. Now that Enilo has eaten it, however, all Nethin can do is pull the strings like a puppeteer, and even then, Enilo's combat effectiveness falls well short of an admiral's. The one upside? No one in Qinghai has ever laid eyes on or heard of Enilo, so his true strength can be displayed openly, at least for now. Here's a revised version of that sentence. Unlike the Golden Lion Shiki or Katakuri, the arrival of these two would instantly spark an uproar, so they must be held back for the final battle or employed only as a last resort. Please share the rest of the chapter, and I'll continue polishing it into smooth, idiomatic English, renaming Ross to Nethin and ensuring he's portrayed clearly as male. Chapter 406, The Captain's Summons. At last, Enilo was escorted back to the Cake Island base. Nethin stood before his array of soul incantations and puppets, his gaze fixed on the latest edition. With a steady hand, he activated the 4th incarnation, molding Enel into his 4th puppet. Enel of the Hell Realm. This puppet's mastery ability was the natural soil fruit. On paper, the natural soil fruit outclassed Katakuri's waxy fruit in sheer potential. Yet Katakuri's devil fruit had already awakened, and his domineering proficiency kept him nearly on par with, even slightly above, earth fruit's raw power. Still, the earth fruit boasted its own unique strengths, the ability to conjure titanic earth giants at will, along with exceptionally high defense and rapid regenerative capabilities. In battles of mass assault, Hell Realm Enel could prove even tougher to break than Hungry Ghost Realm Katakuri, making the two puppets comparably formidable. "It's the right moment," Nethan murmured, eyes sparking as he surveyed his creations. The four puppets stood motionless, each a testament to his skill, while the hurricane incarnation hovered silently at his side. He turned toward Trafalgaro and drew in a deep breath. "Summon all captains, except the commanders of the 8th and 9th teams. Every member is to assemble at our Cake Island base immediately." Finally, the stage was set. Nethan allowed himself a brief, satisfied smile. The next move in his grand design was about to begin. Trafalgar Luojun, leaned back in his chair and let a cold smile spread across his face. It had been far too long since he'd felt the thrill of giving a direct order. "Prepare for a major operation," he announced. No sooner had the words left his lips than he strode from the room and dispatched riders to summon every captain in the Ghost Hand Pirates. Since the Whitebeard War, there hadn't been a single full-scale council until now. On a distant island's casino floor, Admiral Fujitora rolled a pair of dice, but his focus was on the hushed conversations drifting around him. He set his cup down, glanced up through the haze of cigar smoke, and for the first time in ages, something like solemn anticipation touched his features. "So it begins," he thought. Out on open water, Shiryu of the Rain stood atop the shattered bow of a pirate ship he'd just cleaved in two. He exhaled smoke from his cigar, the embers' glow rivaling the setting sun. "Pathetic," he muttered. "Whoever dared to invade the 10,000 kingdoms is in for a rude surprise." His Den Mushi buzzed at his hip. Shiryu answered with a swift flick of his wrist. The corner of his mouth curled into a hungry grin. He hadn't felt this alive in years. With a barked order, he turned and strode down to his own vessel. "Set course for Cake Island," he called to his crew. "We sail at once." Nethan swayed between two laughing barmaids in the dim glow of lantern light, one gilded arm draped possessively over each of their shoulders. His head lolled against the chest of the woman on his right, eyes half closed in a blissful stupor. A mug of ale sloshed, forgotten at his feet. Suddenly, the enchanted spy bug clipped to Nethan's tunic buzzed insistently. He let out a disgruntled hum. "Who dares interrupt me?" He peeled himself upright, unsteady, and slapped the bug to his ear. His grin vanished. In a heartbeat, he pushed the women gently but firmly aside, causing both to teeter on their stools. "Report," he barked, voice crackling with urgency. Far away, on a wide, windswept plain, more than a dozen giants, towering figures of stone and sand, gathered in a loose circle. Their brutish forms gleamed in the sun as they sparred and drilled, trading crushing blows that would fell a normal man. To these ancient titans, a few years was no more than a breath. A century counted as a passing moment. "Hireding," bellowed Rhodes, a sand giant whose shoulders rippled with each movement. He strode over, calm bug in hand and a broad grin splitting his weathered face. "There's woe, art of another war on the horizon." Hayerding, the giant captain at the circle's center, lifted his gaze. In his dark, storm-lit eyes danced the promise of thunder. He rose to his full, daunting height, voice rolling like far-off thunderclaps. "It is our honor to fight for Lord Nethan." Elsewhere, in a serene council hall, diplomats and dignitaries murmured at polished oak tables, unaware how swiftly the tides of war were gathering. Lafitte stood in the dimly lit auditorium, one hand resting on the polished mahogany of his cane, the other tucked behind his back. Before him, a lone pianist wove a gentle melody that filled the chamber with quiet elegance. Then, just as the final notes began to fade, Lafitte's concealed communicator chimed softly in his pocket. He allowed the piano's last echo to hang in the air for a heartbeat, then flipped open the device. A slow smile curled at the corner of his mouth. He rose, straightened his coat, and turned toward the musician. "That will be all for today," he announced, his voice smooth and absolute. The pianist nodded and fell silent, bowing before slipping away into the shadows. A day later, deep within the headquarters on Cake Island, the main hall buzzed with anticipation. One by one, the warlord captains gathered beneath the vaulted ceiling. By sunset, all had arrived except for 3. The 8th Division's Gigi, the 9th's Boa Hancock, and the 6th's Nico Robin. With Wano country's vast seas to patrol, many of the captains hadn't seen each other in over a year. Lafitte sauntered past Shiryu of the Rain, squinting up at the man's aura. It was sharper, colder, proof that Shiryu had grown stronger in Lafitte's absence. He chuckled softly. Shiryu's lips curled into a dangerous grin as he lifted a cigar, smoke curling around his shoulders. He said nothing. Nearby, Fisherman, towering and serene, arched an eyebrow. "Feels like we got here a bit early," he remarked in his deep, rumbling voice. Lafitte swept the room with a grand gesture. "Patience," he said. "The boss is on his way." All eyes turned toward the entrance. The only person missing from this clandestine gathering was Nethan, the man who oversaw it all. At the thought of his impending arrival, a palpable tension rippled through the assembled captains. Tonight, Cake Island would host a reunion unlike any other, and when Nethan finally steps through those doors, nothing would remain the same. In the cramped briefing room, captains from every corner of the fleet had gathered around a long, scarred table. Trafalgar leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Fisherman. "If I'd known this was coming," he drawled, "I'd have taken the shot sooner. Not that being first always helps. Miss it by a hair, and you risk losing your bird entirely." Fisherman's chest tightened. Trafalgar was junior in rank, but his bond with Nethan ran deeper than any of theirs. That was why his idle taunt stung far more than any reprimand from above. Fisherman forced his shoulders to relax, muttering under his breath as he swallowed the urge to snap back. Before the tension could boil over, soft footsteps sounded outside the door. Robin stepped in first, draped in a new black cloak with the number 6 embroidered in silver on each sleeve. One by one, the other captains followed, Fujitora among them, each wearing the matching cloaks marked 1 through 5. These were the freshly issued cloaks of Captain Wano's elite squadron. "Captain Robin," Fisherman greeted, inclining his head respectfully. He didn't much concern himself with the others. He feared neither Shiryu of the Rain nor Admiral Fujitora, but Robin's presence was different. Everyone here knew how closely she worked with Nethan. Robin paused by the table's head, her gaze drifting toward the empty seat. "Has Lord Nethan not arrived yet?" she asked quietly. A hush fell over the room as each captain waited, straining to catch the faint echo of approaching footsteps and the arrival of their leader. Lafitte turned to Robin and spoke softly. "Are you ready?" Robin met his gaze, without a flicker of hesitation. Calm and composed, he nodded. "I'll be there shortly." No sooner had he spoken than the sound of heavy footsteps approached from outside. The door swung open, and a lone figure shuffled in, head bowed and arms dangling lifelessly at his sides. So still he might have been a corpse. He crossed the threshold without a word and stood silently near the entrance. A moment later, a miniature whirlwind drifted into the room, visible to the naked eye. Curious bright eyes and a mischievous grin formed within the swirling vortex as it inspected the gathered officers. Finally, Nethan appeared. He wore a heavy black cloak, the sleeves trimmed in deep blood-red embroidery. No numerical insignia marked his cuffs, only 2 bold crimson stripes. Immediately, a chorus of voices rose in unison. "Master Nethan! Captain Nethan!" More than a dozen lieutenants knelt, paying him the respect he'd earned over the past year. They had all chosen to serve underneath him, drawn by his unmatched skill and unwavering leadership. Even Shiryu of the Rain, who nursed his own quiet grievance against Admiral Fujitora, harbored not a single thought of defying Nethan. Nethan's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile as he surveyed the room. "Everyone's here," he announced. "Excellent." Nethan offered a faint smile to the assembled captains, then nodded toward the motionless figure at his side. "This is one of my puppets," he announced. "It will join us on this operation, and its combat ability rivals any of yours." A ripple of surprise ran through the captains. None doubted Nethan's claim outright, but the notion that a puppet could match their own strength was both startling and unsettling. Clearly, Nethan possessed a secret power they barely understood. Chapter 407, Let the Beasts Become History. Nethin's hurricane avatar was a force to be reckoned with, second to none in the entire assembly. After briefly explaining that the corpse-like figure before them was merely another of his puppets, he reached out and summoned the hurricane once more. Humph! At his command, the vast cyclone warped and collapsed under his pull, folding in on itself until it became a single orb of wind. The sphere glowed bright white, pulses of raw power radiating from its surface. Every veteran in the room, seasoned captains and elite combatants alike, felt its might penetrate their very bones. With only a cursory scan of its aura, they knew they were in the presence of something truly fearsome. Among those watching were the newly appointed captains of the 8th and 9th Divisions, alongside 2 additional veteran captains whose reputations for strength were nearly unmatched. Fishermen and the others exchanged uneasy glances. On one hand, the Ghost Hand pirates' burgeoning power was a boon. They had always been Nethin's right hand in battle. But on the other, it meant Nethin himself was becoming an unstoppable force, one whose authority would soon eclipse all current superiors. For these captains, veterans who had helped build nations from the ground up, the implication was clear. Their own indispensability to the world government, once unquestioned, was now in jeopardy. And as they stared at the humming sphere of compressed wind, they knew the age of the beasts was nearing its end. All that remained was to see whose history would be written first. Nethin stepped to the head of the long conference table and fell silent. Around him, captains from across the fleet sat in shadowed seats, their expressions unreadable. The 8th and 9th Divisions had not been told of this meeting. This assignment would remain strictly off the books. He scanned the room. Many here had already suspected the target. Vice Admiral Fujitora and Nico Robin in particular wore knowing looks. Nethin cleared his throat and spoke, his voice calm but resolute. "Our next objective," he announced, "is to annihilate the 100 Beasts pirates." The words rang out in the hall, yet the assembled captains barely batted an eye. Time had changed them. Not long ago, the idea of toppling Kaido's crew would have seemed impossible. Now, they stood among the most formidable pirates on the seas. No force, not even the other emperors, could make them yield. Only the world government still rivaled their strength, and even it had lost the initiative. A quiet confidence settled over the room. The beast pirates, once thought untouchable, were about to face their reckoning. Nethin let the moment stretch, letting every captain grasp the weight of their task. Soon, the death knell for the 100 Beasts pirates would toll, and they would be the ones to sound it. In the sudden hush that fell over the hall, Lafitte's laugh rang out, sharp and amused. Nethin allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Not a single captain present dared to interrupt or question him, exactly the kind of obedience he preferred. "All right," he said, lifting a hand to still the last echoes of mirth. "Let's go over the essentials of our operation." He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle in before continuing. "The 100 Beasts pirates have entrenched themselves in Wano country, and our scouts have locked in their exact position. We're taking the fight to them, moving in full force on Wano. On the opposing side, Kaido has joined with Wano's shogun, Kurotatsu Orochi. We know very little about this black charcoal Orochi, but make no mistake, his power will almost certainly rival that of our own 3 calamities. In short, we'll be facing off against the 3 calamities of the 100 Beasts, the 2 escaped generals from the Big Mom pirates, and Orochi himself." At that, Nethin's voice grew colder, edged with determination. "This will be our greatest test yet. Dismissed. Prepare your men." Standing in the command chamber, Nethin ran through his battle, plan one last time. Each of his top officers had a precise assignment. Fujitora would confront the leader of the 3 calamities, and he was more than capable of handling him. Hurricane Incarnation would suppress the second foe without breaking a sweat. Shilio of the Rain would neutralize the third, keeping it firmly under control. The 2 rising generals, Fisherman and Trafalgaro, had matured enough to mop up any stragglers. The Charcoal Serpent, that was Helding's specialty. As for the rest, the Giant Corps, the 7 squad's vice-captains, even the hell-forged puppet Enilo, they'd be smashed in a single decisive strike. All that remained was Kaido of Beasts. Nethin remembered their last encounter well. Kaido had underestimated him, and the duel had ended in a stalemate. But time and training had changed everything. Nethin's power had leapt forward by leaps and bounds, far outstripping whatever gains Kaido might have made. In sheer strength and skill, there was simply no comparison. So the final mission would fall to him alone. Captain Nethin would be the one to face Kaido and decide the fate of this war. After Nethin finished his brief introduction, Admiral Fujitora fixed him with a steady, thoughtful gaze and spoke in a deep, measured tone. "What forces do you actually have at your disposal?" Nethin said nothing, but Robin stepped forward, calm and composed, to fill the silence. "Aside from our captain," she began, "we have the Giant Corps and several vice-captains, including Reiju, who commands the 8th Division." Fujitora inclined his head. That was more than enough to turn Wano upside down without calling in reinforcements from elsewhere. Even if the entirety of the 100 Beasts pirates survived, these forces could still crush them. He turned to Shiryu of the Rain, who stood smoking a cigar. A swirl of icy air clung to Shiryu's form, crystallizing the wooden deck beneath his feet. Slowly, he exhaled a pale plume of smoke and asked, "When will you strike?" Nethin met Shiryu's gaze and offered a small, confident smile. "Now," he replied. "We give no warning. There is no notice beyond action itself. Not even the world government will see this coming. Before the invasion of Wano Kingdom begins in earnest, no one will know what's happening, or expect it." Nethin stood on the deck, arms folded, as Robin leaned over the navigation table. "I've cross-checked every file on the Beast Pirates' combat strengths and their attack formations," she said quietly, tapping a stack of reports. "Their numbers are massive, but they rely heavily on brute force and predictable maneuvers." Nethin's dark eyes narrowed. He looked around at the captains assembled behind him, the sea veterans who'd volunteered for this strike. "Listen carefully," he began, his voice low but steel-edged. "We cannot fail. The Beast Pirates have terrorized the New World for too long. When this is over, their name will be nothing but a footnote in history." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Nethin met each officer's gaze in turn. "We strike at dawn. Stay alert, move swiftly, and do not, under any circumstances, let them retreat." Meanwhile, half a day's sail away along the Grand Line, the Straw Hat crew had finally arrived at the capital of the Seven Seas on Cake Island. Their captain and first mate had called the entire crew to muster on the harbor docks. "We're facing the new CP9, directly under world government orders," the captain announced, pacing with arms akimbo. "They've been hunting us for days, but tonight we turn the tables." Painted banners snapped in the sea breeze as the crew cheered. Within hours, they clashed with the government agents in the winding streets of the capital. The CP9 operatives launched a disciplined assault, but the Straw Hats fought with unbridled energy and creativity. Luffy's rubber-fueled barrage scattered their ranks. Zoro's sword sliced through steel. Sanji delivered kicks that sent agents flying into cobblestone walls. By midnight, the new CP9 lay defeated. In the aft, Ermath, the Straw Hats freed the Vaughn family from a makeshift detention camp just outside the city walls. The rescued ranchers hugged them gratefully, tears in their eyes. Back at Marijois, news of the defeat hit the world government like a thunderbolt. They'd counted on CP9's absolute reliability, and now the secret blueprints for the ancient weapon Pluton had vanished alongside their fallen agents. Panic swept through the high command. When the 5 elders summoned Admiral Shinji to answer for the failure, he offered only a single excuse. "It was the work of the clandestine CP organization," he told them, bowing his head. "Their interference was beyond the scope of my command." The elders' faces went pale. To blame the shadowy CP division and admit they'd lost control was almost unthinkable. But Shinji simply tightened his lips and refused to say more. In that tense silence, the world government realized how badly they'd underestimated the Straw Hats and how vulnerable their own secret projects had become. The upheaval surrounding the capital of the Seven Waters has captured the full attention of the world government's highest echelons. Yet not a single intelligence agency has detected the gathering storm. Dozens of ghost hand pirate captains, flanked by elite officers of the Giant Corps, and several vice-captains, are already setting out for Wano country, venturing deep into the heart of the New World. Their chosen route? The the skies themselves, an ingenious move that all but guarantees they'll go unnoticed at sea. If the world government were to uncover this plot now, it would ignite an ace-level crisis, an unstoppable chain of events destined to plunge the entire world into chaos. Chapter 408, Morning Tea and the Clash with Kaido. High above the clouds, nearly 3,000 meters up, the warship glided through the mist with unerring steadiness. Nethan and Admiral Fujitora took turns at the helm, their practiced hands keeping the vessel perfectly balanced in the thin air. After a time, Nethan stepped onto the deck and leaned over the rail. Beneath them, an island half hidden by a swirling current came into view. He glanced at Fujitora. "Is that Wano country?" Lafitte stood nearby, eyes fixed on his eternal pose. "If this thing's still working," he said, "we've got Wano right below us. Let's head down." Nethan gave a curt nod. Channeling his devil fruit power of distortion, he sent a faint ripple through the air around the ship. The entire vessel began to descend, drifting smoothly down through the clouds until its hull broke the sea's surface. With the gentlest of splashes, they landed offshore. Standing at the prow, Shilio of the Rain took one last drag on his cigar before tossing it aside. Without hesitation, he leapt from the deck and dropped onto the rocky beach, surveying the land with keen interest. Fujitora followed, stepping ashore with the aid of his wooden cane and scanning the horizon. One by one, the fishmen jumped down after him, then Lafitte and the rest of the crew. Finally, Rhodes led the giants of the Corps off the gangplank, their towering forms thundering onto the sand. There, assembled on Wano's mist-laced shore, Nethan's company prepared to press forward. Ahead lay unfamiliar roads, the promise of morning tea, and beyond all else, the looming confrontation with the mightiest creature in these islands, Kaido of the Beasts. Nethan lounged against the railing of the ship's deck, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Shilio of the Rain, his long cloak billowing in the sea breeze, tapped impatiently on the mast. "Why not head straight for Kaido's fortress?" she demanded. "We've waited long enough. Last time the Beast's pirates nearly tore us apart. This time, we mean to finish them for good." Nethan gave a lazy half-smile. "We'll have time enough for that. But first, breakfast and a spot of tea." Both Lafitte and Trafalgar D commented with amused chuckles. They'd sailed these waters many times, but few captains could afford the casual luxury of stopping off for tea in Wano country, especially with Kaido looming ahead. "Tea first," Nethan repeated, rising to his feet. With that, he began to stride forward across the deck. Shilu shot him a scowl, but fell into step behind him, and the rest of their small company followed, including a handful of restless crew members eager for action. By midday, they reached Jianlu Town, a sleepy settlement nestled at the edge of Kuri in Wano country. Its wooden buildings stood quietly against the rolling hills, punctuated by the welcoming red lanterns of a modest tea house. "Here we are," Nethan announced, pushing open the sliding door. The faint scent of oolong and sweet red bean wafted out to greet them. Inside, the proprietor, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, stood behind the counter, her teapot cooling on its rack. "May I help you?" she asked politely, though her eyes widened at the strange assembly before her. A towering swordswoman dripping with rainwater, a dandyish navigator in a long coat, and a rakish captain and his crew. Nethan stepped forward. "We'll take your finest morning tea," he said, patting the counter, "and some rice cakes if you have them." The woman's nervousness melted into practiced hospitality. "Of course. Please have a seat. I'll bring it right away." As they settled at the low wooden tables, Lafitte and Trafalgar continued to chuckle under their breath. Shilio reluctantly sank onto a cushion, folding her arms, but Nethan simply closed his eyes and inhaled the tranquil hum of the tea house. "Ready to march on Kaido's army after this?" Trafalgar asked quietly. Nethan opened one eye. "After we've had our tea," he said, his voice soft but resolute, "then the real fight begins." Nethan and his companions stepped out of the tea house into the gentle afternoon light. A young woman in a brightly patterned kimono emerged to meet them, about Hancock's height and just a bit taller than Nethan. Her large, clear eyes widened in surprise as she took in their foreign attire. In Wano, people dressed very differently. It was obvious at a glance that they were outsiders. You're from outside?" the attendant Eju blurted, astonishment coloring her voice. Nethan met her gaze. noting her delicate features and the faint pink flush on her cheeks. "Yes," he replied calmly. Robin leaned closer, a teasing smile on her lips. "Be nice to him," she whispered. "Nethan doesn't often get this kind of attention." Nethan shot Robin a sharp look, but the fishman and Fujitora seemed entirely oblivious, their eyes fixed elsewhere. Turning back to Aju, Nithan requested tea. As she arranged the cups, he discreetly slipped his other hand into his sleeve. With a subtle motion, he released a faint twist of energy, enough to brush Robin's chest. For an instant, her eyes widened, and her cheeks bloomed with color, but just as quickly, she recovered her composure and gave him a half-smile. Tea served, the moment passed, yet everyone around sensed the undercurrent of power Nethan possessed, and the quiet way he wielded it. Chapter X, Morning Tea in Wano. Nethan settled into a low bench inside Aju's tea house, surveying the cramped space with cool indifference. Before he could lift his teacup, he sensed movement at his back. Almost invisibly, a pale hand sprouted from the folds of Robin's ebony cloak and reached toward him. He didn't flinch. With a single commanding look, Nethan forced Robin's phantom limb to retreat. Then, his voice calm but imperious, he spoke to Aju. "This place is far too small. Move that table outside." Aju froze, sweat beading on her forehead. Wano country had been sealed off for years, its shores protected by treacherous currents. Any stranger setting foot on its soil was labeled a pirate and locked up on the spot. She pressed trembling fingers to her lips, weighing her options. "Please," she whispered, "you must hurry on. This country isn't kind to outsiders. If the samurai catch sight of you, they'll—" Nethan waved her off with an easy flick of his hand. "No need to worry. We're only here for morning tea." He paused, his lips curling into a faint smile. "After that, we have business with Kaido of the beasts." Aju's jaw dropped, and her fingertips shook as they hovered over the tray she held. In Wano, everyone knew Kaido, the fearsome pirate lord who'd forced Shogun Orochi into submission. To be seen with him, or to even seek him out, was more than risky. It was insanity. You really plan to meet Kaido?" she managed at last, her voice quavering. "He's the one who collaborates with Orochi, the Shogun himself. Do you know what you're asking?" Nithan only gave her a lazy shrug as he rose from his seat. "We do. Now, if you wouldn't mind moving that table, I'd appreciate it." As Aju scurried to obey, her mind raced. Her tea house was about to become the starting point for a meeting that could shake all of Wano, if it didn't get them all arrested first. A moment later, a woman in a kimono stepped out of the tea house. She was its proprietor. "Aju, bring out the tea," she ordered. Aju froze, eyes wide. "Miss Ahi, are you sure?" Ahi shook her head, voice calm. "Of course, they're polite enough, and they came to drink tea. How can we, a small tea house, turn them away?" Aju bit her lower lip, hesitated for a long beat, then sighed inwardly and slipped inside, dreading the trouble she might attract. Within minutes, the staff rolled out a low wooden table on the porch. Nethan settled onto the cushion with easy confidence. Fujitora, Shiryu of the Rain, and the others took their seats around him. Aju knelt before them, porcelain teapot in hand, and poured steaming green tea into each cup, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Unbeknownst to them, a passerby spotted the strangers and voiced his surprise. "Look, outsider, in our town." Voices rose in astonishment, and the rumor spread like wildfire. In no time, the entire village buzzed with the news. From Kuri to all corners of Wano country, everyone was talking about the mysterious travelers in the little tea house. Chapter X. Nethan and his companions had just finished their first cup of tea when two unfamiliar figures appeared on the town's narrow street, their expressions icy and impassive. They strode toward the tea house with determined steps. Aju, who was in the middle of pouring Nethan's second cup, froze. Her pupils shrank, her hands trembled, and hot tea sloshed over the rim, splattering onto the wooden table. "It's them," she whispered, voice tight. "The suppliers." Nethan's brow furrowed. The suppliers? Weren't they the middlemen who distributed artificially manufactured devil fruits to the world government's elite forces? But Caesar Clown was safely in his custody. How could these men be looking for him here? He shook his head. Clearly, even without Caesar or Doflamingo, Kaido's crew had other routes to obtain artificial devil fruits. After all, Vegapunk wasn't the only genius in the world. There had to be other scientists capable of replicating those powers. Aju, too shaken to continue pouring tea, turned to the tea house's proprietor, Ahe. He stood by the open door, forcing a calm exterior as he watched the two newcomers draw nearer, then glanced back at Nethan and the others with tense, watchful eyes. A hush fell over the room as everyone braced themselves for what the suppliers had come to claim. Could you please provide the full chapter text you'd like rewritten? I only see the single sentence, the two givers were getting closer. Once I have the complete passage, I can craft a polished, coherent English version with Nithan as the male protagonist. Chapter 4-9, The Gathering of Beasts. Two local devil fruit users, both empowered by artificial fruits, stepped out from the town with icy glares fixed on Nithan and his companions. Outsiders have the nerve to show their faces here? You're braver than I thought, one of them growled. In his hand he wielded a massive machete, and his forearm was thickly coated in silver hair, like that of an orangutan. At first, neither Nethan nor Fujitora even glanced in his direction, but when the brutish figure lunged forward, closing in on Shilio of the Rain with blade raised, something in the rain wielder snapped. A hard, frosty light ignited in Shilio's eyes. With a contemptuous snort, he lifted his teacup and flung its steaming contents into the air. Click! Click! The hot tea froze instantly in midair, crystallizing into shards of ice that rained down and encased the attacker's hairy arm in an instant. His machete clattered to the ground as he froze in place, trapped by the sudden cold. Aju stepped back, her mouth agape. It's frozen. How is this possible? She whispered, disbelief etched on her face. The emissary froze at the sight before him, his face blanching as a wave of horror washed over him. His eyes darted back and forth, and he dared not step closer. From the edge of the clearing, he managed a quavering shout. What have you done? Shiliu of the Rain didn't bother to answer. He simply stepped aside, and in a calm, cold voice, said, Run. At the low wooden table nearby, Trafalgar lifted his teacup for a slow sip. He never looked at the emissary, only stared down at the tabletop as he set the cup back in its saucer. If you value your life, you do well to get out of here, he said, his tone flat. Don't fool yourself just because your boss has pull. A soft, mocking laugh floated on the breeze. Oh, I'm practically trembling, Lafitte drawled, then vanished like smoke. In an instant he reappeared behind the emissary, a silent shadow. The man's scalp prickled, every hair on his body rose at once. Instinctively, he tried to back away, only to have Lafitte's polished mahogany cane block his retreat. Don't run, Lafitte whispered, his voice laced with a strange, hypnotic edge. Go tell Kaido that the ghost hand pirates have come calling, or rather, that we've come to kick him off his perch. Now move. Lafitte's words still rang in the giver's mind as his figure blurred and he bolted forward, then vanished in an instant. At that same moment, Lafitte himself flickered out of sight and reappeared as if nothing had happened, seated once more at the tea table, lifting his cup for another sip. Fisherman watched him calmly. This tea's awfully bland, he remarked, taking a slow drink. He glanced over at Fujitora. Don't you find it hard to swallow? Fujitora chuckled, swirling the tea in his own cup before tasting it. A simple brew and light fare are more than enough. A hard life teaches you to appreciate modest comforts. Fisherman snorted. If you've enjoyed finer tea, why settle for this rough stuff? One by one, the others joined the banter, voices rising and falling, until at last Aju and Ahi, who'd been staring in stunned silence, blinked and came back to themselves. Crane eyed the assembled group, Lafitte, Fisherman, Fujitora, and then looked toward Nethan's companions. For so many formidable figures to appear here in Wano alongside Nethan, they can't be just any travelers. Indeed, her hunch proved correct. In the wake of Lafitte's demonstration, the giver lay completely overwhelmed, utterly outmatched by Nethan and his newfound allies. Nethan and the others appeared determined to challenge Kaido, and Aju couldn't help the knot of worry tightening in her chest. The dread Kaido inspired across Wano was well known. He was far more terrifying than the former shogun Kurozumi Orochi. Aju's eyes darted to the ice sculpture of the giver, now frozen solid in the courtyard, and then to Shiliu of the Rain. Though she'd regained her composure, a flicker of shock still lingered in her expression. Nethan caught her gaze and offered a gentle smile. I know you're worried about being dragged into danger, he said, but wherever there's risk, there's reward. Trust me, your morning tea won't have gone to waste. Before Aju could reply, Robin lifted her teacup, letting the fragrant steam curl upward, and spoke in her usual measured tone. "Getting involved can be both unlucky and lucky," she remarked. "In time, you'll see how it changes you. For the better, I think." As they returned to their tea, tension humming beneath polite conversation, 9 miles away at the center of Wano, a different scene unfolded. In a sumptuous palace adorned with rolling screens and gilded carvings, Kaido of the Beasts sat cross-legged on a silk mat. His crimson eyes gleamed as he brought a lacquered gourd of sake to his lips. With a low chuckle, he murmured to himself, "So they say the ghost hand has come to Wano?" Nethan lifted his wine gourd, took a slow sip, then set it down with a soft clink. He met the wide-eyed subordinate trembling before him. "Sir," the man stammered, voice barely above a whisper, "our informant's description matches the Ghost Hand pirates, and all their captains have arrived." Beast Kai let out a low, satisfied ooh, putting aside his own gourd. "So they've come to fight," he observed. The subordinate's body shook with fear. Over the years, the 100 Beasts pirates had only grown stronger. But the Ghost Hand pirates were something else entirely. If they clashed here in Wano, blood would be spilled on both sides. What lunacy drove those Ghost Hand fools to slip into Wano without warning and challenge us, he thought. Only madness could match Captain Nethan's own reputation. A deep, resonant growl rolled through the grand hall as Nethan rose. A palpable wave of authority swept over everyone present. "This is my territory," he announced, voice calm but ice-cold. He allowed himself a thin, dangerous smile. "Send word to Jack and the others. Tell them to muster at once." "Yes, Captain Nethan," the subordinate cried, bowing low before racing out to deliver the order. Inside Kaido's palace, a lone figure sat cloaked in shadow, Kurotan Orochi, the shogun of Wano country. He lifted a delicate sake cup, letting the amber liquid catch the torchlight as he spoke with deliberate calm. "The Ghost Hand pirates," Orochi mused. "They claim to be the strongest. Certainly they've shown talent." Kaido scratched the back of his head, then raised his wine gourd for another long draught. Orochi set his cup down, voice soft but firm. "Since they've brazenly arrived in Wano, we cannot simply watch. We must teach them a lesson they will not soon forget." At Kaido's signal, beast pirate officers across the land sprang into action. Within moments, the fearsome three disasters had converged on the palace gates, their monstrous silhouettes blotting out the moon. Elsewhere in the fortress, Star Samuji, formerly a general under Big Mom, slammed his fist on the table, searing cold hatred in his eyes. The Ghost Hand pirates, that audacious upstart, actually made it to Wano? Standing beside him, General Snug's voice dripped with contempt. He dared to slip into our territory alone and march straight to the 100 Beasts' headquarters. He'll pay for that insolence in blood. A rumble shook the hall as Star Samuji rose to his full height. "All beast pirates, assemble! Prepare for battle!" With that command, the palace filled with the thunder of armored boots and the deadly promise of war. Chapter 410, Power of One Punch. The people of Janlu Town had long since vanished without a trace. Some slipped into hiding, others fled to the farthest reaches of the country. Only Aju and Ahe remained. There was little point in running when everyone knew they had stood by Nethan and his companions. Rumors spread too quickly in Wano. Now, the two women crouched just outside the tea house where Luo Zi and the others were gathered. Anxiety shadowed their features. Ahi pressed a hand to her forehead, eyes dark with worry. "Aju," she whispered, "if we get an opening, you must make a break for it." Aju's shoulders slumped. "And go where? There's nowhere left to hide in Wano." She glanced at the sea beyond the cliffs, then at the closed gates of every port. "They're all sealed." "We'll figure something," Ahi insisted, though her voice trembled. "Even if it means slipping out through a remote village or stowing away on a fishing boat, we can't stay here." Before Aju could reply, the earth beneath them shuddered. As a seasoned warrior, she recognized the tremor at once. She dropped to one knee, her hand brushing loose gravel. "Did you feel that?" she asked, peering toward the horizon. But nothing visible stirred. Then the ground cried out in violent pulses, boom, boom, as if some colossal force was crashing toward them. Both women shot to their feet, hearts pounding. Whatever threat was coming, it meant danger for everyone in Janlu Town, and perhaps a chance, however slim, for escape. The ground tremors grew steadily stronger. Ahe, sitting next to Nethan, stiffened as he felt the vibrations and glanced up in the same direction Aju was watching. At first, nothing was visible, but the air itself seemed to thicken, suffused with a suffocating dread. Within moments, heavy clouds rolled in, blotting out the sun. "Here they come," Nethan murmured, eyes still fixed on the porcelain teacup before him. The half-filled brew rippled with each violent shake of the earth. Around the low table, Shiryu of the Rain and the others sat perfectly still. None betrayed the slightest reaction. They were all warriors of peak-of-the-sea caliber, seasoned enough to keep their composure even if Mount Tai itself crumbled at their feet. Boom, boom, boom. The rumble of drums and the thunder of hooves grew louder, and at last a massive, dark shape took form on the horizon. In its center marched countless figures, each emanating the unmistakable aura of a formidable fighter. It was the 100 Beasts Pirates, an entire army of elite users advancing in flawless formation. With every step they took, the black shadow expanded, revealing the full might of the pirate host. Nethan finally rose to his feet, letting the teacup clink softly against the table as tea sloshed over the edge. Yet his face remained calm, his posture unshaken. Across the veranda, his allies mirrored his steadiness, prepared to confront whatever threat the approaching horde would bring. Nethan barely had time to process what he was seeing before the enormity of the threat hit him. Far off on the sands stood Jack the Drought, an immense mammoth and one of the Beasts Pirates' dreaded 3 disasters. Beside him, towering over the assembled ranks, was Smoothie, the former sweet commander of the Big Mom Pirates. Ahi and Aju exchanged horrified glances. Even at this distance, the sheer force of their presence pressed in on them like a physical weight. Any ordinary soldier would have fallen to his knees simply from the oppressive aura emanating from those two alone, let alone an army packed with devil fruit users. Yet in the face of such overwhelming odds, Nethan moved with calm determination. He set his teacup down, rose to his feet, and squared his shoulders. Immediately, Admiral Fujitora and the rest of their party followed his lead. Silence hung between them, but their intent was unmistakable. They were walking straight into the heart of the enemy force. Ahi and Aju watched, spellbound, as this handful of fighters, Nethan, the Admiral, and their companions, marched steadily toward Brest, the monstrous lines of the 100 Beasts Pirates. 3 disasters stood ready for battle, flanked by 2 notorious pirate commanders, yet not one of them appeared intimidated. Step by resolute step, Nethan's group closed the distance, determined to make their stand. Nethan paused at the edge of the clearing, facing 6 fearsome opponents. 5 of them bore that same oppressive aura he had already come to dread, but standing among them was another unmistakable presence. Heitan Orochi, general of Wano country, and looming behind all 6 was an even greater terror, each step of his colossal frame shuddering the earth itself, Kaido the Beast. Across the field, a handful of Wano's so-called legion of capable users, power granters who'd watched Nethan advance, exchanged skeptical glances. From their vantage point, he looked nearly ordinary. No rippling muscles, no exotic armor or battle scars, just a slim, unassuming youth. "Look at him," one murmured, squinting. "He hasn't the build of a warrior. One solid punch and he'd go down like a sack of rice." His companion shrugged. Still, Master Kaido showed interest in him. "We shouldn't underestimate someone under the Beast King's protection." The first shook his head. "We'll see about that." He raised his bow, settled the arrow against the string, and took careful aim at Nethan. "If I can fell him with a single shot, that'll be a fine achievement." "Don't be foolish," the other warned, but he did not, or could not, stop his friend. In a single smooth motion, the bowstring snapped forward. The arrow flew through the air, whistling straight toward Nethan, and in that moment, every heartbeat seemed to tremble with possibility. If this shot found its mark, Kaido's wrath would be swift, but what a story it would make. And yet, as the arrow sped forward, neither Grantor nor General suspected how far Nethan's own power had already begun to stir. Nethan stood his ground in the dark cloak, gaze fixed on Kaido the Beast, just as the rat-headed archer of the Giver Legion drew back his bowstring. "Kaido," Nethan said coolly, "it's been years. I'm glad you're still breathing." At once, an almost physical force, a cold, imperious will, erupted from him. The single arrow trembled in the Giver's hand, but he could no longer focus. A crushing weight bore down on his chest, each breath a battle. His eyes bulged, foam gathered at the corners of his mouth, and then he blacked out. All along the Giver vanguard, soldiers stumbled and fell like overturned dominoes. Their advance ground to a halt under Nethin's silent command. Only when Kaido, mounting his great horned steed, unleashed his own overwhelming presence did the line stabilize once more. Kaido's voice rolled across the field, low and amused. "Step closer. Show us the full measure of your pride. So you really do want to fight, Ghost Hand, boy who dared best the white-bearded sage." Nethin's cloak stirred in the wind as he gave Kaido a slight nod, the chill of his eyes promising that the real battle was only just beginning. Nethin's words hung in the air. "What you did back there was beautiful." Beast Kaido made no move to hide his curiosity. He simply fixed Nethin with a hard stare, and the oppressive weight of his aura rolled outward like a dark tide. Nethin met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not here to compliment you," he said. "I'm here to destroy you." A feral grin split Kaido's scarred face. "If you want to take my head," he rumbled, "be my guest." No sooner had his voice faded than Nethin blurred forward in a single, fluid motion. In the next instant he hovered before Kaido, mid-air, right fist clenched and enveloped in crackling, spiraling energy. A low hum swelled into a roar as Nethin drove his fist toward Kaido. At the same moment, the beast emitted a thunderous bellow and slammed forward his own arm, shrouded in an inky black aura of power. Neither man spoke. Neither hesitated. The two forces met, Nethin's coiling energy against Kaido's dark dominance, in a cataclysmic collision that sent shockwaves rippling through the clearing. Boom! Spectators froze, unable to believe the explosive fury of that single impact. Yet both warriors stood fast, their battle only just beginning. Two colossal fists met in midair, and the very fabric of the void seemed to turn into a rippling lake. Waves radiated outward from the point where Nethin's punch met Kaido's, each ripple visible to the naked eye. The shockwave was so immense that the ground beneath Kaido buckled and undulated like a storm-tossed sea, hurling rocks and debris in every direction. Truly, one blow to rival the power of heaven and earth. Chapter 411. The decisive battle begins. A blood-curdling scream cut through the chaos as Nethin's aftermath attack washed over the field. Dozens of empowered warriors, caught without a chance to react, were torn to shreds. Those at the very edge flew backward, bones snapping with sickening cracks and blood spurting from broken jaws. Only Big Mom's most senior officers and the 3 Calamity-class lieutenants managed to remain standing, and even they were gasping for air. General Smoothie felt her heart hammer in her chest. She watched, wide-eyed and horrified, as Nethin's spectral hand collided with Kaido's massive fist. No matter how fiercely she hated him, she could not summon the fighting spirit she once had. Her sharp senses and domineering observation revealed the cruel truth. The gulf between her and Nethin was simply too great. Worse yet, she could feel that Nethin's aura had soared far beyond what it was when he last faced Big Mom. "He's gotten so strong, and you too, Kaido." A tremor ran through her voice as she watched the two titans clash. The decisive battle had truly begun. Nethin's warped power met Kaido's fist in a series of thunderous clashes. With each impact, the ground shuddered and cracked, rippling like storm-tossed waves. Gritting his teeth, Nethin drew in a steady breath, as if to speak, but then he let out a fierce growl and lunged, firing his right fist straight at Kaido's. Boom! A violent surge of distorting energy exploded outward. Kaido the beast staggered, his colossal frame pitched backward by the blow. He stumbled a few meters with his first step. Then, after a dozen more, he skidded fully tens of meters away. Across the battlefield, onlookers were stunned. Shi Liu of the Rain Corps and his lieutenants remained impassive. They had witnessed Nethin's power before. But among the ranks of the 100 Beast Pirates, even the 3 Calamities exchanged incredulous glances. "Lord Kaido, how is this possible?" someone murmured. Others echoed the question in hushed panic. Beast Kaido, who never once yielded ground to his fiercest attackers, had been thrown off balance and driven backward by Nethin's single, direct punch. The realization rippled through every pirate present. Kaido had finally met his match. Nethin's eyes narrowed as he faced Kaido. He let his fist drop from its guard, an amused smirk curling his lips. You've grown stronger, Kaido rumbled, his voice low and gravelly, but so have I. In an instant, Nethan coiled, tapping into the legendary moon step, his foot blurred, propelling him upward in a graceful arc. Before Kaido could react, Nethan's fist drove into the beast's jaw with thunderous force. Boom! The impact cracked the earth beneath Kaido's feet, fractures spiderwebbing outward. Thick veins bulged on Kaido's arms as he reeled, but still he couldn't muster enough strength to fend off Nethan's blow. Lord Kaido, one of the three calamities shouted, stepping forward in alarm. The other two followed, ready to intervene. At that moment, Nethan flicked his wrist. From the sleeve of his coat burst a tiny whirlwind, a sprightly vortex no larger than a child's fist. It hovered in the air, its translucent wind-forged limbs slicing through space. "Meng, let's go," Nethan called, voice calm but firm. The miniature tornado let out a crisp, strident cry, "Superstorm," and exploded into a flurry of razor-sharp wind blades. They whistled through the air, encircling Kaido in a cutting gale that tossed dust and debris at his feet. Though Meng's small, almost adorable form belied its power, the chilling force of its storm blades was undeniable. Kaido braced himself, realizing too late that Nethan's true strength had already eclipsed even the legendary might of Whitebeard at his peak. And the battle was only just beginning. Drawing on Nethan's soul incarnation, he unleashed the full power of the storm fruit. In an instant, a titanic hurricane roared to life, blotting out sun and sky. Countless razor-sharp wind blades, each as swift and deadly as a mast, or swordsman's strike, lashed out, sweeping across the entire 100 Beasts pirates' fleet. Wherever they fell, the earth split open in jagged fissures. Nothing could withstand their fury. "Damn you, old man! Get down here!" Jack the Drought bellowed, charging in his mammoth form. He thundered straight into the nearest wind blade, tusks locked defiantly, and barreled into the storm's eye. Blow after blow hammered his thick hide, but still he pressed on, bearing the assault to shield his comrades. At his flanks, King the Conflagration and Queen the Plague roared in concert, ready to join the melee. Yet before they could move, bright points of light pierced the clouded heavens. Flaming meteorites streaked down in fiery arcs, crashing onto the deck with earth-shaking force. Amid the chaos, Admiral Fujitora stood serene before King the Conflagration, his cane sword leveled with practiced calm. At the same moment, Shiryu of the Rain raised his blade and swung. A frigid gale howled across the battlefield, freezing the ground in an instant and encasing the front line, from Jack the Drought all the way back to King and Queen, in solid ice. The three calamities were cut off in an instant. Smoothie and Snug both paused, surprised, but pause didn't mean they were safe. From the right flank, the fishman lunged at Smoothie with a roar. "Room!" At the same moment, Trafalgaro strode straight toward Snug, his expression cool and unflinching. Behind them, Nethan's incarnation of hell materialized, its dark aura flaring. Without hesitation, it slammed into the Big Mom remnants who had been advancing on Owen and Perospero, both pirates carrying bounties over 500 million. They'd been so confident in their strength, but this hellish projection stopped them cold. A sinister laugh rang out. "Ho ho 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 ho!" Lafitte swept his staff in a wide arc. Sensing the struggle on this side, he decided to reinforce the defense here instead. He wheeled around and joined the fray, filling the gap in their lines with practiced ease. On the deck above them, Nico Robin folded her arms and watched quietly. Whatever was about to unfold, she was ready. Even in the heart of this chaos, her calm never wavered, proof of how far she'd come alongside the Ghost Hand pirates, all the way to the summit of the seas. "It's begun," she murmured to herself, eyes narrowing as the battle's first sparks flew. On the other side of the field, the thunder giant Herding charged straight at Kamiwano Country's supreme shinobi, Heitan Orochi. In one brutal motion, he seized the general with both arms, and with a triumphant roar, summoned a colossal orb of crackling lightning that slammed down before Orochi's stunned face. "Let them see the true might of our giant legion," Herding bellowed. Simultaneously, Sand Giant Rhodes and his comrades unleashed their fury. Towering waves of razor-sharp sand, each grain forged into a miniature steel blade, surged forward like a living wall, cutting a bloody swath toward the ranks of the gifted warriors. From Nethan's audacious opening strike to this moment, less than half a minute had passed, and the battle had already erupted into a white-hot maelstrom. Every part of the field resonated with thunderous clashes and howling winds. Watching from a distant rise, Ah and Aju stood frozen in disbelief. Whether it was the meteor blazing through the sky or the frost racing across the ground, Nethan and his allies were exhibiting power far beyond anything they had imagined. Most startling of all was Nethan himself. As leader, he'd squared off against the beast Kaido one-on-one, and the monstrous warrior had been utterly unable to strike back. Each of Nethan's blows rang out like an earthquake, shattering the earth beneath their feet. Aju's eyes were wide with shock. It's astonishing that Rosna, who looks perfectly ordinary and even stands a bit shorter than Nethan, can wield such tremendous power. Chapter 412, The Beginning of Defeat. Boom! Boom! Thunderous roars shuddered through Wano country as the climactic showdown between the four emperors' pirate crews erupted. The very land seemed on the brink of collapse, and countless souls, soldiers and civilians alike, scrambled for cover, only to find there was nowhere left to run. In a remote mountain valley, Foxfire Kinemon and Kozuki Momonosuke trembled in terror at the earth's violent convulsions. Without warning, a massive avalanche of rock thundered down the slope. Kinemon leapt forward, sword drawn, hacking away at the boulders with desperate strength. But despite his efforts, a wall of jagged stones pinned young Momonosuke to the ground. Across the country, in the heart of the battlefield, two figures towered above all others. There, Nethan faced Kaido in a clash so titanic that each collision sounded like an earthquake. The shockwaves radiated outward, reducing fortifications to rubble and sending seasoned pirates, those with bounties in the tens of millions, scrambling for stability. Not even they could withstand the aftershocks of these cataclysmic blows. As dust and debris settled, one truth grew unmistakable. This was not merely a fight for victory. It was the beginning of a downfall that would shake the very foundations of Wano country and of every soul caught in its wake. Nethan had only brought along the cream of the Ghost Hand pirates, and with good reason. On a battlefield of this scale, anyone short of captain or vice-captain was little more than expendable fodder. Yet here, he needed no cannon fodder. He was more than enough on his own. Boom! 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 With every cataclysmic punch, Kaido flew backward, crashing into the earth until half his massive frame was buried in the ground. Their last encounter had forced Nethan to rely on his speed and space distortion abilities just to keep pace with the Beast King. Now, he'd simply unleashed the raw, unmitigated power of his distortion force in a straight charge, and reduced Kaido to ruinous suppression without once warping space. "Impossible," muttered the onlooking members of the Beast Pirates, their faces pale with shock. From a safe distance, they watched Kaido, legendary terror of the seas, struck down by a single man's fists. Even the veterans who'd followed Kaido through a dozen campaigns trembled at the sight. That man, how could he be so overwhelmingly strong? Even Whitebeard himself might not have stood a chance against blows like those. Yet here was Nethan, his chest heaving, standing triumphant over a fallen emperor, and the world would never be the same again. Beast Kaido had never imagined Nethan's power could climb so steeply. In their world, Admiral-level strength was supposed to hit a hard cap. Beyond that, even the greatest devil fruits offered only marginal gains. If it were otherwise, someone like Garp eating the sage Momo fruit would blow the entire Grand Line to dust with a single punch. In reality, at Garp's tier, devil fruit enhancements barely register. Yet Nethan's rapid ascent had shattered every assumption Kaido held. In mere years, Nethan had become a fighter Kaido could scarcely hope to match. Facing just one opponent, Kaido knew he had almost no chance of victory, let alone two of them. With a furious roar, Nethan swung a spiraling punch at Kaido's arm. The twist of his fist slipped past Kaido's guard, driving deep into flesh and bone. Kaido grunted in pain as blood spattered from the corner of his mouth. Nethan tensed as Kaido's armored fist thundered toward him, its sting sharper than any tremor wrought by Whitebeard's devil fruit. Though Kaido's immense frame could absorb punishing blows without so much as a stagger, Nethan welcomed the resistance. It had been ages since he'd felt so alive in combat, finally unleashing his full power against a worthy opponent. Thankfully, Kaido's legendary durability kept the fight from ending in an instant. Had the brute fallen too quickly, This would have been just another hollow victory. No rush of adrenaline, no true test of skill. And for a warrior who lived for the clash of wills, such an outcome would have been a tragedy. A flicker of memory passed through Nethin's mind, a bald-headed colossus from another world, crackling with raw energy. Then Kaido struck again. Boom! Kaido crossed his massive forearms overhead, metal ringing as the two forces met with earth-shaking resonance. Nethin's arm jolted under the pressure, but he roared defiantly and drove his fist down with every ounce of strength he possessed. Boom! This time, Kaido's guard finally gave way, Nethin's blow crushing through the defense and sending shockwaves roaring into the air. The earth beneath Kaido's feet exploded outward, fracturing and collapsing into a cavernous pit hundreds of meters across. With a deafening roar, Kaido himself vanished from sight as he plummeted into the maw of the earth, mud and boulders hurtling in all directions. When the dust settled, he lay at the bottom, coughing violently, blood streaming from his mouth and nose. Lord Kaido, Jack Drought, one of the beast's feared disasters, and the nearest to Kaido, raced forward, eyes blazing with disbelief. Kaido, the indomitable monster who had never lost a one-on-one fight, had just been felled by Nethin. Jack stumbled in shock, an inexplicable momentary lapse, when a calm, booming voice cut through the chaos. "Too distracted, aren't we, Jack?" He looked up to see Admiral Fujitora standing on a broken ledge overhead. The Admiral's sword hovered just above Jack's cranium, the air around the blade shimmering under an immense gravitational pressure. "No!" Jack roared, hurling himself backward, but Fujitora's gravity blade had already struck. The crushing force drove Jack's head down against his spine, a sickening snap echoing in his ears. Dizziness washed over him, and his knees buckled. Then, abruptly, the weight lifted. Fujitora withdrew his sword, and Jack collapsed to the ground in a daze, every breath a ragged gasp. Above them, Nethin emerged from the dust cloud, sword still dripping with cracked stone. Even sprawled at the bottom of that vast pit, Kaido's groan of pain reminded everyone that the battle was far from over. Jack fought to haul himself out of the earth's collapsed pit, but the world spun around him. 2 unsteady steps later, his vision fluttered, his knees buckled, and he collapsed, eyes rolling back as he slipped into unconsciousness. One of the 3 calamities of the 100 Beasts pirates, Drought Jack, had fallen. His defeat set off an immediate chain reaction. The other 2 calamities, standing not far away, went pale with dread. Jack's cruel illusion, his trump card, had been unmasked and shattered in an instant. The man responsible was Captain Shiryu Amame of the 2nd Division. Amame's strength had surged into the realm of an admiral, nearly rivaling Admiral Fujitora himself. To have such a formidable opponent undone so easily, what could follow but complete annihilation? A cold smile crept onto Amame's face. In one fluid motion, his blade leapt forward, piercing Jack's chest. An ice-like force radiated from the wound, freezing organ and flesh alike in a single heartbeat. Jack's scream of horror and disbelief was cut short as his body stiffened, transformed into a crystalline statue. His final expression, frozen terror and defiance, remained etched on his face for all eternity. Amame stepped back, voice low and confident. "I never expected you'd fall before I finished you." With that, he turned away from Jack's frozen form, leaving the battlefield silent, but for the distant echoes of his triumph. Shiryu of the Rain drew his blade, turned to face Fujitora, and let out a slow plume of smoke. Fujitora, in response, slid his sword back into its wooden scabbard, set it gently aside, scratched the back of his head with a sheepish grin, and said, "Just a lucky strike." He snorted, as if dismissing the entire exchange. Shiryu of the Ume, watching quietly, smirked to himself. He knew Fujitora's game, humble in public, yet fiercely proud in private. If not for that concealed arrogance, Fujitora never would have dominated him so thoroughly. These days, Shiryu no longer dreams of unseating Nethin, but he still harbors the ambition to claim Fujitora's place. Chapter 413, Despair. With the 2-3 disasters felled, the battlefield among the remnants of the Big Mom pirates erupted into chaos. Smoothie's attention was fixed elsewhere, until a familiar, taunting voice whispered in her ear, "Don't look that way." Before she could react, Fisherman had materialized at her side. A bullet whistled out of his gun and slammed into Smoothie's torso. Her Kenbun Shoku haki alerted her to Fisherman's sudden approach, but the shot was accelerated, and her focus was split. She managed only to twist her body enough to blunt the impact. The bullet tore through her clothes and left 4 ragged holes across her chest. White-hot pain ripped through her, and she cried out as blood spattered the deck. Instinctively, she activated her devil fruit power, wriggling and reshaping the torn flesh to seal the wounds. It was enough to keep her standing, barely, but it cost her precious seconds. Fisherman was already upon her again. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession, aiming at her heart, her head, and her neck. Smoothie curled backward at the last instant, letting each bullet whiz past by mere inches. The recoil of the final shot rocked her back, and before she could right herself, Fisherman's boot connected with her lower abdomen. He drove her off her feet, hurling her into the air. She spat blood as she flipped, struggling to regain her footing. But Fisherman wasn't done. He raised his gun again, and a brilliant flash of light bathed the deck. In that momentary glare, both combatants froze, unsure whether danger still lurked in the shadows. End of chapter. With that eerie laugh echoing across the battlefield, Trafalgaro unleashed his power. In an instant, Smoothie's body was torn apart, arms, legs, torso, even her head severed in one fell swoop. She wasn't mortally wounded, but her ability to fight was gone. Fisherman, still standing nearby, scowled at Trafalgaro. "Hey, don't butt into my fight, you bastard!" Leaning warily on his demon-forged blade, Luo let out a hollow, ghostly wail. Not far off lay the fallen form of General Snag. Even in death, the old warrior's voice was calm and cutting. "What took you so long? The beast pirates are finished." At that moment, Lafitte, perched on a nearby outcrop, raised his pistol and fired. The shot rang out, clean and merciless. Prospero's head snapped back and he collapsed. Lafitte exhaled softly, his voice low and chilling as he surveyed the carnage. Another Yonko pirate bites the dust. The others fell silent, eyes turning toward the center of the fray, where Nethin stood, the banner of his crew snapping behind him. Under his command, each battle had been decisive, each enemy ship crushed without mercy. It was a campaign of conquest, unlike any the sea had ever seen. Word of their victories spread like wildfire. There was no stronghold they couldn't topple, no legendary pirate crew they couldn't shatter. They reminded Lafitte of a name spoken in reverent tones across the Grand Line: Gol D. Roger. In his time, Roger had clashed with the Whitebeard pirates, the Golden Lion Shiki, and countless other great powers. He'd been driven to the brink by Vice Admiral Garp more than once, only to emerge triumphant each time. Victory after victory, Roger carved his path to the summit of the seas, and now, under Nethin's banner, a new legend was being forged. The world would soon learn. This was only the beginning. From a certain point onward, the Roger pirates became utterly unstoppable. Sweeping across every sea, even the likes of the Golden Lion or Whitebeard would sooner fall back than face them, and in a deathmatch, no one could overcome Roger's crew. Trafalgar spoke in a low voice. "Yes, today's Nethin has set this world ablaze. Neither the Whitebeard pirates nor the red-haired pirates can slow his march. Pursuing Ralph Drew, hunting down every road poneglyph and fragment of its history, he treats it like a mere trifle. The tide has turned. Nothing can stand in his way now." Lafitte let a small, knowing smile curve his lips as he stared aft toward the red line, the very direction of the world government's stronghold, Murray-Joyce. Beyond that distant continent lay the shattered remnants of the beast pirates, long since crushed. Whitebeard's fleet had fallen ages ago, and even the fearsome red-haired pirates would falter before Nethin's relentless ascent. On the open sea, only one force still stood between Nethin's squad and the Ghost Hand pirates, the world government's remnants. Far ahead, the last surviving disaster struggled against the living whirlwind, the Hurricane Avatar. Nethin ground his teeth, fury twisting his features. It was maddening. This storm beast had barely enough intelligence to form simple tactics, yet it shrugged off every strike. Worse still, the disaster commander, one of the world government's finest, couldn't land a decisive blow. "Damn it," Nethin roared, driving his fist into a cluster of razor-sharp wind blades. The cyclone shattered, but the Avatar merely surged forward, gathering power for its next assault. His 2 comrades, the other disasters, flanked the hurricane, their frustration plain to see. Being unable to defeat such a dim-witted monster humiliated them. Every failed attack burned like salt in their wounds. Suddenly, two figures materialized at Nithan's sides, Admiral Fujitora, sword of pure ice glinting in his hand, and Shiryu of the Rain, blade humming with unseen gravity. Both wore calm, unreadable expressions as they faced the roaring maelstrom. Together, Nethan and his unexpected reinforcements prepared to turn the tide. The hurricane's howl grew louder still, but now humanity's sharpest blades stood ready to cut through the storm. Nethan and his partner drew their swords in perfect unison, channeling their strikes toward the lone survivor of the three disasters. At that instant, their comrade, the hurricane incarnation, let out a thunderous roar. He gathered the raging winds above, compressing them into a single, devastating downpour that crashed onto the enemy like a colossal hammer. Under the combined onslaught of these three general-class fighters, the final disastrous beast didn't even have time to cry out. It shattered into countless blood-red crystals, scattering like fragments of a broken gem. Fisherman, watching from a safe distance, stood frozen in awe. "Unbelievable," he whispered, heart pounding. "Thank goodness I fight alongside the Ghost Hand pirates, not the Beast's pirates." With the three disasters obliterated and the remnants of the Big Mom pirates in full flight, Wano's last general, Kurotan Orochi, surrendered the field and retreated. Nethan raised his blade overhead, electricity crackling along the steel's edge. "Thunder Spear!" he roared, unleashing a blinding bolt of lightning that lit up the battlefield in pure white fire. Nethan unleashed a bestial roar as crackling thunder coalesced into a single, jagged spear of lightning. He hurled it straight at the black charcoal serpent. The serpent raised its arms in a desperate block, but the blast slammed into its steel-like scales and sent it reeling backward. Today, Nethan's mastery of the Thunderfruit had reached its pinnacle. His power now eclipsed that of fishermen and stood on equal footing with Admiral Fujitora and Chief Warden Shiryu of the Rain Tribe. Against such force, Haitan Orochi was clearly outmatched. With a final, echoing crack, Nethan came to a halt in midair. Lightning danced around him as he fixed the serpent with an icy glare. Orochi's fangs clenched. He spat out a curse and raised his head to meet Nethan's stare. But then a shiver ran down his spine, and he glanced to his left. A lone figure strolled forward, twin revolvers gripped casually at his hips, Fisherman, captain of the 3rd Division in the IWC. And behind him moved another man, a long blade strapped to his back, his gaze cool and unflinching, Chief Warden Shiryu of the Rain Tribe. In that moment, Orochi realized he faced not just one Thunder Wielder, but a small army of the world's most formidable fighters. And none of them wed any sign of holding back. Nethan, captain of the 4th Division of the world, felt a cold bead of sweat trickle down his temple. He shifted his gaze over his shoulder and saw two figures closing in, one from the left, one from the right, each advancing methodically, leaning on a sturdy wooden cane. On his left stood Fujitora, captain of the 1st Fleet, a calm smile playing on his lips. On his right came Shiryu of the Rain, captain of the 2nd Fleet, his eyes steely and resolute. Nethan's heart dropped. This was it. From farther off, Lafitte appeared, twirling his cane with casual grace, followed by Robin, her expression unreadable. Above them all, the tempest that had torn through the sky condensed into a fierce, churning tornado, its roar echoing across the battlefield. 7 fleets, 7 captains, now formed a perfect ring around the black charcoal serpent. At their center, the great beast's coal-black scales had gone ashen, its eyes hollow. Whatever fury had driven it moments before was gone, replaced by a single, overwhelming emotion: despair. Chapter 414, Naval Shock. Boom, boom. Every time Nethan unleashed a punch, Kaido of the Beast Pirates reeled backward. The legendary Yonko's stamina was finally beginning to ebb under the relentless assault. Their duel had raged from the clouds down to the wreckage-strewn coastline. A once thriving town lay in ruins, and the entire Julie region bore the scars of their clash. At last, Nethan gathered his remaining strength and drove a titanic fist into Kaido's chest. The shockwave ripped through the air, sending the mighty emperor flying head over heels for a full kilometer. He crashed to the ground in a thunderous impact, gouging the earth into a series of vast trenches hundreds of meters long. Then silence. Kaido, the indomitable strongest creature in the world, lay motionless in the dust. With his fall, the ranks of the 4 emperors had been reduced to 3. Onlookers, Admiral Fujitora, the remaining Marines, and the defeated members of the Beast Pirates gazed in stunned awe. Nathan stood alone at the epicenter of the devastation, chest heaving, haki still crackling over his skin. Fujitora exchanged a glance with the other admirals. They knew that, with a single blow, Nathan could shatter Kaido's seemingly immortal body and finish him once and for all. But death was wasteful. Their true mission had been to seize control of the Beast Pirates, not annihilate them. Nathan's plan was far more cunning: convert Kaido into the first and mightiest pawn in his own emerging empire. The great battle was over. The ocean wind whispered through the smoldering wreckage. A new era was about to begin. One in which Nathan, the man who had felled a Yonko, would reshape the balance of power on the seas. The sheer speed of their assault was impossible to believe, so fast that onlookers could only stare in stunned disbelief. A fearsome fleet from among the four emperors had been utterly annihilated in the blink of an eye. It wasn't that the Beast Pirates were weak, it was that the Ghost Hand Pirates had become overwhelmingly powerful. Even if the Red Hair Pirates were to arrive in Wano country this very moment, they'd stand no chance against this new, second generation of four emperors. With this victory, the 10,000 Kingdoms territory would swell by nearly 50% overnight. Lafitte allowed himself a sinister grin. He knew Nathan had never cared about claiming the title King of the Pirates. But by crushing the Beast Pirates, they were inevitably marching toward a direct confrontation with the world government, the colossal regime that had ruled for 8 centuries. In the past, not even Gold D, Roger, or the legendary Rocks Pirates had managed to shake its foundations, yet under Nathan's leadership, toppling that mighty empire no longer seemed a distant dream. Then, abruptly, everything went silent. On the outskirts of Jianlu town, Aju and Ahi exchanged worried glances. The relentless tremors that had rattled the earth for miles had suddenly stopped. Whatever came next, the eerie calm told them that a new, even greater storm was about to break. Nathan and Ahe rode their horses to the ridge's crest and froze. Below them, the once fearsome battlefield lay strewn with bodies and broken banners. Neither could quite believe their eyes. The Beast Pirates' leader, flayed and pounded until he was nothing more than a carcass, was dragged off like spoiled fruit. Not far away, the 3 disasters dangled from crude nooses, their bodies bruised and broken by Fujitora's marines. Even Kurotan Orochi, Wano's tyrannical shogun, had been cornered by the admiral's remaining squadron. They'd heard his defiant roar moments before they slew him in cold blood. Nathan pressed a hand against his chest, struggling to slow his pounding heart. It all felt impossible, an impossible victory, as if they'd dreamed it. Ah. He drew a long, steadying breath beside him. Wano has been sealed off from the outside world, she said softly, voice echoing amid the wind. Back when the Beast Pirates fell, no one outside these walls knew. It took time for Fujitora's report to reach the Navy and the world government. Across the seas, that news finally arrived and sent shockwaves through every command structure. How could the Beast Pirates be wiped out so thoroughly? How could Orochi fall so ignominiously? Nathan swallowed hard and turned back to the ridge. The distant sun glinted off the scattered swords and broken armor, as if heralding a new dawn. Wano was changing, and nothing, not even the mightiest pirate or the cruelest shogun, would stand in its way again. Admiral Sengoku leaned heavily on his desk, disbelief etched across his face. This had to be a joke. They'd actually wiped out the entire 100 Beasts pirates without so much as a whisper of warning. Even at their peak strength, the Beast Pirates rivaled Whitebeard's and the Red Hair Pirates' fleets, second only to the Ghost Hand Pirates. Their captain, Kaido the Beast, was said to be an undead monster. Time and again the Navy had captured him, tried every execution method in their arsenal, only to watch him escape each prison with impossible ease. And now, in just a few days, word had come that the Ghost Hand Pirates had utterly annihilated Kaido's entire force. It sounded like a fairy tale, a fantasy beyond belief, terrifying in its own twisted way. Across the room, Huang Yuan sat on the sofa, staring into space. Moments passed before he spoke, his voice slow and uncharacteristically grave. The news had shaken him to his core, just as it had Sengoku, proof that the Ghost Hand Pirates were far more fearsome than anyone could have imagined. The grand conference chamber fell into an uneasy hush. Murmurs rippled through the gathered warlords as the final report came in. Blackbeard had sent Fire Fist Ace as his counterstrike, but Nethin's Ghost Hand pirates had struck first, silently, efficiently, and wiped Ace and his squadron from the maps. "The Beast Pirates," someone ventured, voice trailing off. "They've been annihilated." General Jean Guo slid down into his chair, eyes glazed with shock. For just a few short years, Nethin had transformed from an unknown captain into one of the 4 emperors of the sea. His Ghost Hand pirates, once a ragtag crew of rogues, were now a colossal fleet whose name alone sent rival crews scuttling for safety. And today, without so much as a heralding war banner, Nethin had toppled yet another empire. Kaido's former territories, rumored to be fiercely defended, had fallen in days. Even portions of Kaido's own forces now sailed under the Ghost Hand flag. No grand armada had preceded this conquest, no fleet of warships, just the quiet, deadly efficiency of Nethin's men. In their wake lay another shattered emperor and a warning that struck deeper than any cannon salvo. The Ghost Hand pirates wait for no one, and they show no mercy. Even if the Navy headquarters were to throw all of its strength at the Ghost Hand pirates, victory would still be far from guaranteed. Not even in the heyday of Roger, the Pirate King, did any pirate fleet grow so vast or so fearsome. Roger himself never inspired the kind of collective dread that Nethin does now. This really is a new age, an age in which Nethin alone commands respect. Everyone else must yield before his blade, not the pirates of the 4 seas, not even the 4 emperors. Ask yourself, could the red-haired pirates or Whitebeard's fleet stand toe-to-toe with the Ghost Hand pirates today? Could any force possibly prevent Ghost Hand Nethin from claiming the title of Pirate King, finding the One Piece and ruling the seas? The answer is a resounding no. Even though Nethin has yet to set foot on Ralph Drew, his present power and influence crown him, in all but name, the monarch of the oceans. Silence fell over the Admiral's conference room. Men who had weathered 1,000 battles sat wordless at the weight of this realization, and somewhere deep within the world government's corridors of power, the same shockwaves were rippling outward, an earthquake of unease that no fortification or chain of command could contain. High-ranking ICLs all the way up to Commander-in-Chief Gang Gukong, and even the storied 5 Old Stars, almost toppled from their chairs. How could such a massive upheaval have slipped past them until it was already over? Were the intelligence officers truly that incompetent? Wu Laoxing's furious roar thundered through the War Council chamber, and for the first time, real panic set in. Chapter 415, An Unstoppable Tide. Even when Nethin first set foot on the Holy Land, the 5 elders of the world government, sat at the very apex of power, remained unshaken. They sat there, confident in their supremacy. But now, an unsettling tremor runs through them. Their hold on that power is in jeopardy. In the span of mere hours, Nethin's Ghost Hand pirates annihilated Kaido's colossal beast pirates, silently, efficiently, without a trace. Such a feat was nothing short of terrifying, a demonstration of strength that eclipsed every emperor of the sea. With Kaido's forces crushed and his territory seized, Nethin looms larger than ever. One of the 5 elders pressed his fingers to his temple, forcing himself to speak in measured tones. Beside him, another shook his head. "He dared to attack Kaido head-on," the second elder reminded him. "Mark you, this is the same man who stared down Whitebeard himself and lived to tell the tale. He must have a plan, some secret weapon we don't yet know about." Around the table, all 5 elders sat heavy with unease. Kaido's empire fell so quickly, so shockingly, that Marine Headquarters finds itself unable even to contemplate a counterstrike. Even if Nethin's power only swells further in the wake of this triumph, the Navy simply lacks the means to suppress him. They had been caught utterly off guard, and now the balance of the world teeters on the edge of an unstoppable tide. Admiral Wu Laoxing's knuckles whitened around the hilt of his sword. How had Kaido fallen so quickly? At a time like this, dispatching more troops would only be a useless gesture, and the Navy already had enough fires to fight on its own doorstep. He leaned heavily against Yoru, the blade's edge biting into the deck, and ground his teeth. Beside him, his chief of staff released a slow exhale. "Admiral, it's too late to reverse what's happened. All we can do now is contain the fallout." Wu Laoxing lifted his eyes. Contain it how? His aide met his gaze. Let the Navy handle this one in the open. Publicly execute Whitebeard and Captain Fire Fist Ace at headquarters. Bring them both here under guard. That way, as we move to secure Kaido's former territories, we neutralize Whitebeard first. Once that's done, the Navy can concentrate every resource on crushing the Ghost Hands. Wu Laosing considered the plan. It was ruthless, but it was the only way to regain the initiative. He nodded sharply. Do it. Within hours, the order was dispatched to every naval outpost. Less than half a day later, the news spread like wildfire across the Grand Line. In 10 days' time, the Whitebeard pirates' legendary captain, Whitebeard, Edward Newgate, and Ace, commander of his 2nd Division, would be publicly executed at Navy headquarters. The announcement sent shockwaves through every corner of the globe. To the casual observer, it appeared merely as the Navy's stern decree. But for anyone with even a shred of political savvy, it was unmistakable. The world government had just declared total war on Whitebeard. And with their greatest rival brought to bay, nothing would stand between the Navy and the downfall of the Ghost Hands. Nethan's hand trembled as he unfolded the morning paper. They're actually going to strike at the 4 emperors, he whispered, eyes wide. Ever since the golden age of pirates, those 4 titans have dominated every corner of the Grand Line. Even after the Ghost Hand incident and Big Mom's fall, the Navy has never dared mount a direct assault on emperor-level pirates. Every engagement against them has ended in disaster. Had the Navy tasted victory even once, the seas would look very different now. Yet today's headlines left no room for doubt. The public execution of the Whitebeard pirate 2nd Division captain wasn't just punishment, it was a declaration of war. Come at us if you dare, the Navy seemed to say, and see what happens. Nethan dropped the paper and looked up at the sky, as though hoping the clouds overhead might offer some answer. His heart pounded. First, the shock of the execution announcement sent ripples through every port and island. Now, an even bigger revelation lay just below the fold, one that threatened to ignite the entire world in a blaze of conflict. He picked the paper back up with renewed urgency. Whatever came next, there was no turning back now. Morning light streamed across the rooftops of the Chambord Islands, colloquially known throughout the seas as Dressrosa, when messenger seagulls began dropping today's Gazette into town squares, marketplaces, and docks. Residents scrambled to retrieve the papers, hoping for the usual tidbits of gossip or the latest market prices. Nethan, who'd been adjusting a sign on his shopfront, snatched up one of the newspapers gleaming with dew. Heart pounding, he unfolded it and froze. The entire front page was consumed by a single headline, each word set in massive block-letter type. The 100 Beasts, pirates have been annihilated. No subhead, no accompanying article, nothing but those 5 earth-shaking words stretched across page A. He blinked. Today wasn't April Fool's Day, right? Trembling, he flipped to the 2nd page. Blank. Not a line of text, just stark, empty white space. An eerie stillness fell across Dressrosa. Merchants halted mid-shout. Carts ground to a halt. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Only moments before, every tavern and alley had buzzed with speculation about the Navy's decisive confrontation with Whitebeard's forces. Now that familiar clamor was gone, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing on Nethan's chest. His mind went utterly blank. July 17th, 1520, lunar calendar. News from the distant shores of Wano country confirmed the unthinkable. The Ghost Hand pirates had crushed the once mighty 100 Beast pirates, ending their reign in one swift, brutal conquest. For 20 years, the 100 Beast pirates reigned among the Yonko, but today they have been utterly destroyed, wiped from the seas and consigned to history. Their fall heralds the unstoppable rise of the Ghost Hand pirates, the first act in a plan to overturn the entire world, and it all comes to a head today. Somewhere on the open ocean, the Red Hair pirates were celebrating when a sudden hush fell over the deck. Shanks held a freshly printed newspaper in his hand, staring at it in stunned silence. Beside him, Beckman's usual calm was gone, replaced by an expression more grave than any they'd ever shared. At last, Shanks exhaled, tossing the paper to the wooden planks with a clatter. "There's nothing we can do," he said quietly. "No one can stop the Ghost Hand pirates now." With the World Navy's declaration of war against Whitebeard, the seas have erupted into madness. The age of great pirates seems tame compared to the storm of conflicts about to engulf the world. The tide of change is unstoppable. Even one of the four emperors stands powerless before it, forced to watch the mighty Tao Tao River surge unchecked. Our options have narrowed to almost nothing. Beckman drew a slow breath and spoke quietly. We have only two choices: stand up and fight this age, or step off the world's stage altogether. No battle has even begun, yet Beckman already knows how it will end. The Whitebeard pirates don't stand a chance against a fully prepared navy, and their captain is no longer as strong as he once was. When they fall, the world will be divided between two colossal powers, the world government and the Ghost Hand pirates, now calling themselves Wan Guo. Even Shanks's red-haired pirates, though counted among the four emperors, find themselves squeezed between those opposing forces with no room to maneuver. It's almost laughable. The New World was meant to be their domain, yet every ordinary crew that sails into those waters sooner or later collides with one of the emperors. They have only two choices in this new world ruled by the four emperors: join them or die. Even the Chi Wuhai, the rare few who endure these seas, survive only in the narrowest cracks of power. Now the red-hair pirates face that same Fei, Te, about to be driven into those crevices. "What will you do, Shanks?" Beckman asked, exhaling slowly as he turned away from the rail to study his captain's face. Shanks stepped onto the deck and gazed out at the endless ocean. He drew in the sharp sea breeze, watched the sun sink toward the horizon, and fell silent for a long moment, lost in thought. Chapter 416, Kaido's Death. Wano Country, Central City. With the defeat of the Beast Pirates still fresh in everyone's minds, the Ghost Hand pirates wasted no time moving into the power vacuum Kaido left behind. Naturally, absorbing an entire criminal empire came with its share of complications: residual pockets of resistance, mistrustful locals, and the ever-present struggle to establish law and order. Fortunately, Nethan had the perfect tools at his disposal. Wangguo's 8th Division was nothing less than a legion of Germa 66 clones, disciplined, loyal, and fully outfitted for an occupation of this scale. Alongside them, the 9th Division, raised on Snake Island and renowned for its all-female strike force, had already dispatched elite units to reinforce the capital's defenses. It had been 3 days since Kaido fell, and both the 8th Division's Science Corps and the Amazonian squad from the 9th had reached their assigned posts. With stalwarts like Shiryu of the Rain and Admiral Fujitora standing by, Nethan felt little need for concern. Each commander under his banner was more than capable of handling local uprisings. In fact, their mere presence was enough to dissuade any lingering dissent. Now, as the late afternoon slanted through the lacquered gates of the central palace, Nethan prepared to convene his senior officers. Behind him lay a conquered empire on the brink of rebirth, and ahead, the challenge of turning chaos into stability. Inside those palace walls, the real work of reconstruction was about to begin. This chamber lies at the very heart of Nethan's stronghold, and it's been off-limits ever since he crushed the Ghost Hand pirates. No one, not even his own captain, may enter without his express permission. Thick sea-stone chains stretch across the hall, pinning the surviving beast pirates in place. Jack, Smoothie, and the other commanders hang motionless, yet each emits a palpable, oppressive aura, like damned souls trapped in the deepest circle of hell. At the center, the great Kaido himself is bound. Nethan's blade, Village Rain, presses into Kaido's shoulder. Its warping power holds the strongest creature utterly still. It would be child's play to end him here and now, but Nethan has no intention of wasting that raw strength. He plans to shatter Kaido's will, obliterate his soul, and forge him into the ultimate puppet warrior. That final step, however, is still to come. Nethan stands before the fallen Yonko, Kaido, his hand trembling ever so slightly around the hilt of his blade. Across the clearing, Trafalgaro watches with guarded anticipation. Summoning every ounce of his will, Nethan channels the power of his Operation Fruit, attempting to wrench Kaido's soul free from his indomitable body. Still, the air trembles with Kaido's oppressive presence. Beads of cold sweat form on Nethan's brow as he pushes the fruit's power to its absolute limit, and yet the dragon's spirit holds firm. He takes a steadying breath and presses forward. A pale, ethereal glow snakes out from the edge of Nethan's blade, burrowing into Kaido's flesh with a crackle of otherworldly energy. This is the essence of the soul fruit, a power Nethan alone can wield. But even this gift strains against Kaido's mighty constitution, for the warlord's soul is fused so completely with his body that mere force alone cannot sunder them. If it were possible, Kaido would have perished long ago. And yet Nethan does not relent. With the blade's strange force as his anchor, he imposes absolute suppression on Kaido's spirit, clawing inches of ground from the dragon's soul. Each moment is agony, each heartbeat a battle. More than 2 days have passed since they brought Kaido to his knees. 48 endless hours of relentless assault, during which neither Nethan nor Trafalgaro has dared to eat or sleep. Even the steely Trafalgaro has grown pale beneath Kaido's undying aura, and Nethan can only admire the sheer resilience of his enemy. But admiration will not prevail in this war of souls. With the next surge of his spirit Nethan braces himself for the final push. Sweat drips from his temples, every muscle trembles. Still, his expression remains calm, his resolve unbroken. For if he falters now, Kaido's spirit will reassert itself, and the world will tremble again beneath a terror thought finally conquered. Nethan's body had become almost immortal, on paper, not much different from Kaido's. Yet in pure physical might, Kaido still held the uncontested edge. As Nethan continued to pin the great beast down and hammer away at his soul, he was secretly studying the source of Kaido's unparalleled sturdiness, and what he found surprised even him. In this world, true strength sprang from unlocking the body's hidden potential. Someone like Kaido must have every ounce of that potential activated, which would normally mean his cells should have hit a ceiling of activity. Instead, they far outperformed those of any ordinary human, genuinely off the charts. Had Kaido discovered a way to boost cellular activity beyond its natural limits? Estimating Kaido's peak bodily power was one thing. Finding a method to surpass it would be an entirely different challenge. Nethan realized it would demand considerable time, and for now, he could only keep chipping away at his adversary's defenses. Nearby, Jack, his wrists clamped in sea-stone shackles, watched the spectacle with growing impatience. "What are you two actually doing?" he snarled at Nethan and Trafalgar, who were methodically unleashing soul strikes and physical blows on Kaido. Neither of them spared Jack an answer, their focus wholly fixed on probing the limits of the world's strongest creature. Nethan's assault never let up. Between the soul fruit's relentless psychic onslaught and the brutal physical blows from the warped fruit, Kaido remained utterly unconscious, helplessly absorbing every strike. Hours slipped by without mercy. 1 hour, 2, 3, soon half a day had vanished. Even Nethan's ironclad body flagged under such sustained effort. He'd already been subduing Kaido for nearly 3 days and nights straight. Still, he wouldn't relent. At his side, Trafalgaro, drawing on the mind exchange surgery technique, poured every ounce of will into prying Kaido's consciousness from his broken shell. His drain on energy was far lighter than Nethan's, but lacking Nethan's sheer vitality, Trafalgaro, too, was pushed to the brink of collapse. Yet now, fatigue flickered out of Nethan's eyes, replaced by a fierce spark of excitement. He sensed resistance slipping away from Kaido's mind. The tyrant's indomitable will, once as immovable as a colossal steel girder, was finally giving way. It was as if a rusted weld had cracked under a heavy torque. Just a bit more twist, and the bolt would come free. "Keep it up," Nethan murmured, voice low but urgent. "He's breaking." Trafalgaro returned his nod with grim determination. Together, they prepared to deliver that final, decisive turn. The moment Kaido's mental armor shattered completely, his mind would be at their mercy, and nothing would stand between them and victory. Nethan closed his eyes for a moment, drew a steadying breath, and gripped Murasame's hilt with both hands. Summoning every ounce of power from his soul fruit, he unleashed a barrage of spiritual shockwaves that pounded Kaido's soul without relent. Night bled into day and back again for 3 long, grueling cycles. Under that unremitting assault, Kaido's spirit began to fray, its once iron connection to his body withering and shrinking until it barely held. At Nethan's barely perceptible signal, Trafalgaro's eyes blazed. With a guttural roar, he slammed his right hand forward, and a brilliant, heart-shaped pulse of energy tore free from Kaido's chest. It was the very core of Kaido's mind, the product of his soul's constriction, dragged into the open air. Nathan wasted no time. He swept back his sleeve and released a coiling mass of inky shadow, the soul incarnation he had prepared in secret. Under the pull of Trafalgaro's devil fruit ability, that shadow compressed into a perfect, heart-shaped orm. Together, they drove it into the cavernous void in Kaido's body. The vessel vanished the instant it touched flesh, fusing itself to what remained of the broken spirit. Simultaneously, Nathan thrust Murasame forward once more, this time into the exposed core of Kaido's soul. The blade erupted with the full fury of the soul fruit, its power cascading through the void like a tsunami. In a single decisive strike, the last vestige of Kaido's life was torn away. Silence fell at last. Kaido's monstrous presence flickered and died, leaving behind only echoes of a tyrant undone by the combined strength of a hatchet and a heart. Nathan stood over the fading form of Kaido's soul. Despite its legendary strength, it couldn't withstand the power of his soul fruit, and at last its vital energy slipped away. As the Beast Emperor's spirit vanished, a familiar chime sounded in Nathan's mind. The hunt on Kaido of the Beasts is complete. Rewards granted, 80 talent proficiency points, 1 free talent point. Just as he'd hoped, taking down one of the 4 emperors delivered a hefty bonus. Nathan allowed himself a wry smile, then summoned the talent system with a thought. Without pausing, he poured all 80 proficiency points into his Twisted Fruit ability. A soft glow pulsed across the interface. As the Twisted Fruit proficiency climbed to 900, only 100 points away from the maximum. Now, he was that much closer to mastering the power that had just felled a legend. Nathan glanced at the floating talent menu before him, its numbers shifting like living things. Gunshots, 50, melee combat, 100, Twisted Fruit, 900, 6 naval shaves, 0, naval 6 forms of paper drawing, 0, naval 6 style moonsteps, 0, knowledge color domineering, 200 maxed, armed color domineering, 200 maxed, overlord color domineering, 0. So far, he'd earned 6 unspent talent points, just one shy of the 7 he'd estimated he'd need to unlock Twisting Time. According to every previous upgrade, activating a new power always required exactly 1 more point than the last. If that pattern held true, 7 points would be the threshold. Twisting Time wasn't just another skill, it was a complete overhaul of his abilities. From bending matter to conjuring illusions, its very name implied warping reality itself. Crossing that boundary would elevate his distortion prowess from near invincible to genuinely unstoppable. A thrill ran through him. He could almost taste the power waiting on the other side, a force that would reshape the battlefield, suspend foes in temporal stasis, and let him strike with godlike precision. But first, he needed that 7th point, and he would get it one way or another. As Nathan closed the menu, determination flared in his eyes. Time would twist for him yet. Chapter 417, Incarnation of Beasts. With the extra 80 points of twisting power, Nathan felt a surge of strength course through him. It was unmistakable. His body was more powerful than ever before. Until now, he'd been able to defeat a 4 emperor like Beast Kaido in a one-on-one, but handling 2 such titans at once remained beyond him. Now, however, he could plead a duel against a peak-powered Garp and martial Sengoku simultaneously, and win. In fact, his current might far outstrip that of any ordinary powerhouse. He could face them alone. It would take at least 2 fighters of Garp's caliber to even stand a chance against him. Trafalgar Law, standing nearby, couldn't see Nathan's talent interface, but he found himself staring, confusion flickering in his eyes. It had to be an illusion. Nathan's breath, once ragged and spent, had steadied into something deep and unassailable, more potent than before. Yet no matter how he tried to convince himself, the change was real. With a shake of his head, Law dismissed the notion as his imagination. Together, they turned their gaze to Beast Kaido, who sat cross-legged a short distance away. The colossal creature remained utterly motionless, as if he were carved from stone, or as though he'd fallen dead mid-meditation. But, moments later, Beast Kaido's eyelashes fluttered. Nathan and Trafalgaro, poised and alert, both caught the slightest movement. A spark of triumph lit their eyes as they stared intently at Kaido's face. The lashes twitched again, then the lids lifted. Beast Kaido blinked, looking around in confusion. When his gaze fell on Nethan, he hesitated for a heartbeat before blurting out, "Boss?" Relief washed over Nethan and Trafalgaro. There had been no fatal mishap. Their puppet experiment had apparently succeeded, but the relief was short-lived. This version of Kaido moved with a stiff, jerky awkwardness, far unlike the smooth Katakuri prototypes. As he pushed himself to his feet, he wavered precariously and nearly toppled over. Not far off, the newly awakened Drought Jack's eyes went wide at the sight. "Master Kaido, what exactly did you do to him?" he gasped. On the other side of the clearing, General Sumoji stood motionless, shaken to his core. Recognition and horror flooded his expression as he took in the puppet's unnatural rigidity. Whatever Nethan and Trafalgaro had unleashed, it was clear this beast Kaido was far from normal, and possibly far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Smoothie gaped, unable to grasp what Trafalgaro had just done. Even as a former general of the Big Mom Pirates, she'd never seen anything like this. Nethan was using the power of the soul fruit, his very soul incarnation, and somehow he'd injected that incarnation into Kaido's body. It was inconceivable. A soul extracted by the fruit shouldn't be able to inhabit any living creature, let alone another human. Yet Kaido's monstrous new form, clearly a beast homie, left no other explanation. Nethan paid Smoothie no mind. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the transformed Kaido. He frowned, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I should be able to control a full soul incarnation without trouble," he murmured. "But this—" His voice trailed off as he considered the problem. A soul incarnation was only a fragment of his will. Transferring that into another body would naturally be awkward, unfamiliar. "No," he told himself, "it's just a matter of recalibrating." Kaido's beastly form turned toward him, massive scales rippling. When the creature spoke, its voice rumbled in the same earth-shaking tones everyone recognized as Kaido's. Yet beneath that baritone lay a subtle cadence, an echo of Nethan's own speech. It was unmistakable. The soul incarnation was waking to life. Nethan lifted his arms, clenched his fists, then let them fall to his sides as he began to pace the palace chamber. At first his steps were stiff and mechanical, but with each circuit the motions grew smoother, more natural. That was exactly what Nethan wanted to see. He watched, see the puppet's progress, and finally allowed himself a small, approving nod. If he could wield Kaido, the beast incarnation, with this level of precision, it would easily become the greatest puppet in his arsenal, eclipsing even his hurricane avatar. An unholy juggernaut like this could literally lay waste to an entire battlefield. Extraordinary, Lord Nethan. Trafalgaro stepped forward, drawing a steady breath. He had studied every one of Nethan's puppets and avatars, and he knew their full potential. On their own, they rivaled the Navy's 3 admirals. But now, with Kaido added to the roster, Nethan alone held the power to upend the entire world government, a force surpassing even a single emperor of the sea, a feat unheard of in maritime history. Trafalgaro inclined his head. Now comes the real trial, mastering this body's strength completely. Nethan lowered his voice so no one but the beast avatar could hear him. Kaido's body bears no elemental quirks, only its undying physiology. For you, that means no need for intricate techniques or flawless control. Simple, powerful blows will do the job. The beast avatar inclined its head in acknowledgement, its form rippling at the edges. Nethan leaned back against the cold stone of the cavern wall, fatigue finally catching up with him. Though the power of distortion had swelled far beyond his earlier expectations, 3 days and nights of martial combat, followed by relentless spiritual torment using the soul fruit's abilities, had drained him nearly to the bone. His eyelids fluttered with exhaustion. "Above all," he warned softly, "no one must ever learn of your existence." Turning, he met Trafalgar's steady gaze and flicked a glance at Drought and Smoothie. Both observers looked eager, perhaps too eager. "As for these two," Nethan continued, "Smoothie still needs breaking in, and Drought is barely puppet material. I've already severed the soul imprint that bound Kaido's essence to his body. I won't be able to forge another such bond for at least a month. Even then, it'll take 10 to 15 days before a new soul avatar adapts fully to Kaido's form and grants me reliable control." Trafalgar nodded once. "Understood." Nethan gave Trafalgaro a curt nod. He, like everyone else in the inner circle, knew the beast incarnations, especially the Golden Lion, couldn't be revealed. If the Navy or the world government ever learned of such power, the shock would be catastrophic. He slipped out of the palace's depths and made his way to the small room Robin had so carefully prepared. There, Nethan collapsed onto the bed and surrendered to the deep weariness that had built up over days of non-stop exertion. When he finally woke, nearly 10 hours later, the heavy fog of fatigue had lifted, and his spirit felt whole again. Stepping into the hall, he found Robin seated in a corner, absorbed in her book. Rubbing his temples, he asked, "How many days until Fire Fist Ace's execution?" 10, Robin answered calmly, her eyes still on the page. A spark flickered in Nethan's gaze, and before he realized it, a sly smile curved his lips. He drifted over to the low table, poured himself a glass of juice, and took a long sip. There was still work to be done. First, they had to consolidate control over the beast pirates' territories. And all the while, the soul's incarnation within Kaido's body would need time to adjust. Drought Jack had been trying for 10 days straight to fashion a puppet, so far without success. With the Great War raging, he knew it wasn't the time for a decisive showdown against the Navy or the world government, and yet he couldn't resist slipping into Navy headquarters to deliver his own little surprise. To his relief, the entire operation went off without a hitch. After all, when the fate of the world hangs in the balance, how could he ever afford to sit out the battle? Chapter 418, Chaotic Chambord Land. Nethan had just set his teacup of juice on the table when a soft beep came from Robin's pocket. Without looking up, Robin retrieved the small communication bug and pressed it to his ear. "Hello," he said calmly. A few moments passed as he listened. His expression remained impassive. Then he gave a brief hum, tapped the device twice, and ended the call. He turned back to Nethan. "A merman from Murloc Island has been captured by a slave trader," Robin reported. "He's up for auction at Chambord Island." Nethan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Murloc? Chambord?" He tapped his finger on the table. Fishman Island falls under the Ghost Hand Pirates' control these days, and with Shirahoshi's status as the king of the sea and one of the 3 ancient weapons, Fishman Island has been under constant surveillance by our intelligence division. He paused, recalling their network of informants. "Jinbei can handle routine matters, but if something gets out of hand, we send the captain in." "A mermaid?" Robin queried, arching an eyebrow. Nethan rubbed his chin, thinking. "Cammy, wasn't it?" "Yes. Send a team immediately, undercover. We can't afford to let a royal figure be sold at auction." Robin nodded, pulling out a datapad. "I'll have the coordinates and a deployment plan ready within the hour." Nethan stood, steeling himself. "Make it swift and discreet. I want that merman free before the gavel falls." With their orders set, the 2 men prepared to plunge into the chaos of Chambord Island's notorious black market, where lives and legends were sold to the highest bidder. Although mermaids are often dismissed as little more than curiosities, the fact that a slave trader had the nerve to assault one was a direct insult to the Ghost Hand Pirate's reputation. Nethan scratched the back of his neck and smiled wryly. "No need to send a team. I'll handle it myself. With Whitebeard on a collision course with Navy headquarters, I'll be there anyway." Just then, Robin brought him a cup of tea and settled into a nearby chair. She took a calm sip before raising an eyebrow. "Who do you intend to bring with you? The reverie is still in turmoil, and nobody can predict whether the red-haired pirates will intervene. The Navy is mobilizing for Whitebeard, but the world government will be watching Marijiwas closely. You can't just storm in and take whoever you want." Nethan let his shrug do the talking. "Navy headquarters isn't the sacred halls of Marijiwas," he said casually. "All I need is the Hurricane Manifestation and Enel's Hellroad puppet. With my strength backed by those 2, we'll be on par with any Yonko crew." He downed the last of his tea and stood, eyes glinting with confidence. "Now, shall we?" Robin studied him coolly and said, "If you wade into Whitebeard's fight, there's no telling how the world government will retaliate, but it's precisely the moment we need to cripple the Navy and shake the government's foundations." Nethan shrugged on his cloak. "I'll leave this in your hands. Have Yixiao handle whatever comes up. I'm off." With that, he strode from the palace and was gone before Robin's eyes. She watched his retreating form dissolve into the courtyard's shadows, then shook her head. "He's not the strongest of our crew, yet he was the first to swear loyalty. She couldn't help recalling their desperate days in the West Blue, and now, here he was, commanding Navy headquarters as casually as ordering a meal. It all felt like a waking dream. On the distant Chambord Islands, a lone figure descended onto a solitary stone dais. He had glided down from the sky with effortless grace, his feet landing firmly at the platform's center. The moment he touched it, the stone trembled and reshaped itself into the form of Enilo. Then, as if struck by some unseen force, it collapsed into a slick of mud that seeped into the earth and vanished without a trace. The man studied the cleared ground, then murmured under his breath, "I see." Nethan ended the call and slipped the compact earpiece into his pocket. He'd just arrived at Chambord Land. Robin had reported that the Straw Hats had sent the celestial dragons soaring skyward and freed the mermaid Cammy. No surprises there. The story was unfolding almost exactly as expected. He stroked his chin, scanning the mist-shrouded shoreline ahead. At his feet, the incarnation of hell had already dissolved into the earth, its fiery essence seeping harmlessly into the soil. Meanwhile, the incarnation of the hurricane, which now looked like a tiny, playful whirlwind, whirled around a lock of his dark hair, lifting it in a perpetual dance. "What happens next?" the little tornado teased in a high-pitched voice. Nethan didn't respond. He knew the script by heart. The Straw Hats would meet the Yellow Ape on this island, only to be spirited off by Bartholomew Kuma and scattered across the Grand Line. But he had reasons to bend the plot. He didn't want Luffy photographed on Hydra Island, and since the crew had already rescued Cammy, giving them a lift made sense. He drew in a steady breath and started toward the dense jungle, his resolve as clear as ever: keep the story on track, but only as far as he deemed necessary. Nithin strode forward, unleashing his arrogance-charged observation haki across the Chambord Islands. But as he'd soon realize, Chambord wasn't a single landmass at all. It was a sprawling archipelago gripped by utter chaos. Pinpointing a single soul in such a vast, tumultuous area would be next to impossible. Before he'd taken more than a few steps, a thunderous roar echoed through the air. Intrigued, Nethan sharpened his senses, and then came the blast. A blinding golden beam struck the earth with enough force to crack stone. On the receiving end was Eustace Kidd, one of the feared supernova pirates. He managed to dodge most of the shot, but a searing slice grazed his midsection, scorching his shirt and leaving a nasty burn across his abdomen. Gritting his teeth, Kidd pressed a hand to the wound, his eyes narrowing into icy slits. When he dared to look up, he found himself staring down the barrel of a pacifista. The giant war machine, its metal frame modeled on the late warlord Bartholomew Kuma, still smoked at the corners of its mouth. Its single, unblinking red eye fixed on him as it intoned in a hollow, mechanical cadence. Eustace Kidd, pirate captain, bounty, 315,000 berries. You are to be captured alive. Somewhere in the distance, Nethan's haki flickered like a beacon. He'd found his target, and the real game was only just beginning. Kidd squared off against the hulking pacifista before him, lips curling in a fierce snarl. "Shichibukai? What are you doing here?" he barked. The government's secret cyborg program hadn't been made public yet, but Kidd knew enough about the warlords to recognize one when he saw it. The pacifista remained silent, its cold, unblinking eyes trained on Kidd. Its sole mission: hunt down wanted pirates and upload every scrap of bounty intel into the world government's databanks. Right now, its advanced targeting system had locked onto him. Without warning, the massive machine lunged at Eustace with impossible speed. A blinding laser beam cut through the air straight at its target. Kidd's eyes widened. He'd already taken a graze earlier and couldn't afford another hit. He sprang aside in a single fluid motion, the blast scorching the deck where he'd just stood. As he landed, Kidd's anger flared hotter than the laser's blaze. The pacifista's inhuman calm, its refusal to hesitate or yield, stung his pride. "So you're not backing down, are you, Kuma? Tyrant bear," he muttered, tightening his grip on his blade. He might be facing a warlord's living weapon, but he was one of the supernovas of the New World, and no government machine was going to stop him. "Could you please provide the full text of the chapter? I'll then revise it into smooth, idiomatic English and rename the main character to Nethan, as requested." Chapter 419, The Pacifist. A roar tore from Kid's throat as he unleashed his devil fruit power. Every sword, gun, and blade within sight flew together under his magnetic command, merging into two massive steel arms. With a thunderous crash, he swung them down at Nethan, the man they called the pacifist. Though Nethan wielded the fearsome magnetic fruit, able to bend any piece of metal to his will, the impact still slammed him backward through the air. Kid sneered and advanced, eager to finish the job, but a cool voice stopped him in his tracks. "Hold on, Kid." He turned to see disc jockey Apu, one of the feared supernovas, leaning casually against a ruined pillar. Apu's eyes, half hidden beneath his signature headphones, were fixed on Nethan with unmistakable interest. "It's not over yet," he said. As Apu's words echoed, the swirling dust began to settle. To everyone's shock, Nethan rose to his feet, completely unharmed. His eyes lit up, flickering like twin beacons in the haze, and he silently focused on Apu. Apu pushed off the pillar and strolled forward, a mocking grin on his lips. "You know, I heard there's a 260 million Bailey bounty on you, pacifist. That makes you," he paused for dramatic effect, "Nethan, captain of the DJ Pirates." Kid's smile vanished. He had failed to knock Nethan out in one blow, and now all eyes were on Apu instead of him. A prick of irritation grew in his chest. This Apu, so calm, so unnervingly composed, didn't behave like an ordinary man. Kid clenched his fists, ready to prove and protect his own strength. Apu watched Nethan intently, curiosity flickering in his eyes. When Nethan's gaze swung back to Kid, Apu tilted his head and remarked with a half-smile, "Scanning him, are you? Picking your target by the size of the bounty?" He let out a low, mirthless laugh. No sooner had Apu spoken than Nethan opened his mouth and fired 3 searing laser beams in rapid succession, all aimed squarely at Kid. Coldly, Kid lifted a hand, commanding every stray sword and gun floating around him to surge forward. They collided with Nethan's blast in a spectacular display of sparks and shrapnel. Before the smoke even cleared, Nethan's discarded fragments reassembled furiously into colossal mechanical arms. With a roar of effort, he slammed them down on Kid's position. "After this, you won't be getting back up," he snarled. Boom! The ground trembled beneath the shockwave. When the dust settled, Nethan lay half-buried, face first in the earth like a skewered carrot. A jagged fracture ran across the back of his head, blood oozing from the wound. Yet amid the crimson, gleaming metal and circuitry peeked through, no human bone remained. Kid snorted and turned away. With Nethan's systems irreparably damaged, there was nothing left for him here. He strode off, leaving only a crater and the fallen warrior's twisted form to mark the battleground. Apu cocked his head, a wry smile playing on his lips. "So that's it? You just stroll away, like Chi Wuhai was nothing? You're far too confident for your own good." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the deck shuddered beneath them. Cracks spidered out in every direction, and from the yawning fissure rose the pacifist, its laser cannon trained dead on Nethan. He twisted just in time to avoid the main beam, but the blast still caught him on the flank. With a cry, he went sailing through the air, flipped end over end, and slammed into the bulkhead with a thunderous crack. Apu laughed, shaking his head as he watched Nethan slump to the floor. "All right, my turn." He swaggered forward, cocking his pistol and brimming with confidence. After all, these were nothing but a bunch of lawless pirates, and even their prized killer, Nethan, was down for the count. Then, without warning, the pacifist came to a sudden halt. Its massive frame froze in place. Slowly, its head turned, an almost unnatural 90 degrees, then snapped toward the right side of the chamber. Its eyes flickered like 2 strobe lights in a dark room. Apu's grin vanished. He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. Even he felt a twinge of unease. Nethan, finally shaking off the dizziness, crawled to his feet and almost instinctively followed the machine's gaze. Silence fell for a heartbeat, until something beyond the pacifist stirred in the shadows, and the real danger revealed itself. The pacifist didn't utter a word, but in an instant a searing laser shot from his outstretched hand. It tore across the courtyard and slammed into a distant wall with a thunderous crack, sending a cloud of dust spiraling skyward. "Switched targets again?" Apu muttered, narrowing his eyes. According to Vegapunk's design, the pacifist should have engaged the highest bounty threats first, himself or Kid. But this sudden pivot meant there was someone even more dangerous within range. Apu and Kid both recalled the uproar back at the auction, Luffy's explosive punch at the flying dragon man, the chaotic clash with the Navy, and the brief glimpse of an old sea dog slipping away in the confusion. Now, as the debris drifted down, a lone figure emerged. "Hello there." The newcomer strode confidently through the haze, dust falling from his dark coat. Nethin's gaze flicked from the pacifist to Apu and Kid, cool and assessing. "Tell me, Vegapunk's no fire on high bounties protocol is still in effect, right? You're barred from shooting any pirate whose bounty tops 1 billion. The pacifist, locked mid-attack with Kid, froze for a heartbeat as his sensors processed Nethin's words. Then, completely unfazed, he resumed the assault as if the warning had never registered. Nethin strode past the hulking pacifista without so much as flinching, until a laser beam hissed past his shoulder, missing him by inches. He paused, one brow arching in mild annoyance. But all at once, the pirate crew led by Apu and Kid went rigid. Their casual chatter died on their lips as their eyes locked on Nethin. Faces drained of color, they exchanged glances so pale you could almost see the sweat beading on their foreheads. In the sudden hush, the pacifista rotated its head and fixed its unblinking gaze on Nethin. Then, in that cold, mechanical monotone, it boomed. "Bounty. 3,000 berries. Pirate Captain, Ghost Hand Nethin." Those words reverberated through the deck like a cannon shot. Apu's knees wobbled as he muttered, "Ghost Hand Nethin. It really is him." Kid, usually brimming with defiance, swallowed hard. His rebellious spark flickered under the weight of dread. Cold sweat trickled down his temple. His chest heaved with shallow breaths. Because standing there, calm, unshaken, was the man they all feared most. The pirate who'd carved his name across the Grand Line and now sat atop the world's most wanted list. The man they called the strongest in the seas. And he was looking straight at them with that half-smile. Before Kid and Apu could even blink, the pacifist thrust his hands forward. Brilliant light converged in his palms and erupted into twin laser beams aimed straight at Nethin. Yet, under the watchful eyes of his comrades, Nethin did nothing but lift a single hand and press his palm into the empty air, silently, confidently. In an instant, the lasers froze mid-flight as if time itself had halted. Nethin's expression remained unreadable as he curled his fingers shut, gripping the pacifist at a distance. A crackling roar filled the void, and reality itself bent and twisted around the point of contact. The pacifist, who had shrugged off Kid's 2 most powerful strikes, was suddenly compressed like a scrap of paper under a colossal invisible hand. His body warped and folded in on itself. Sparks flew as metal and flesh yielded. In a final flash, he was nothing but a mangled heap of scrap iron. Kid and Apu stood paralyzed, their breaths caught in their throats, cold sweat soaking their backs. They had never witnessed power like this, and they had no idea what to do next.